The rain poured down on the Boston streets as Sophie Martinez stumbled through the darkness, her worn backpack digging into her shoulders. Every step away from the brownstone where she had spent the last 24 years felt like both liberation and terror. Behind her, the life she knew crumbled into memory. Ahead, nothing but uncertainty stretched into the night. Sophie pulled her thin jacket tighter against the October chill. Inside her backpack, everything she owned in the world barely filled the small space. $300 in crumpled bills, a few changes of clothes, her mother's silver locket, and a battered journal filled with musical compositions. It was pathetic, really. How little remained of a life once filled with promise. Her stepmother Diane's words still echoed in her mind like poison. "You're worthless without me, Sophie. Your father left you nothing. You have no skills, no future, no value. Where will you go? Who will want you?" Sophie had wanted to scream that she had value, that she was talented, that her mother had believed in her dreams of becoming a concert pianist. But years of Diane's cruelty had worn down her confidence, until she almost believed the venomous words herself. Almost the truth was Sophie's father had loved her once. Before the cancer took him 6 months ago, he had been her champion, encouraging her music, supporting her ambitions. But in his grief after losing Sophie's mother, when Sophie was 15, he had married Diane too quickly, desperate for companionship. The woman had seemed charming at first, but her true nature emerged the moment the wedding ended. For 9 years, Diane had systematically destroyed everything Sophie held dear. First, she convinced Sophie's father that music lessons were too expensive. Then she sold Sophie's beloved baby grand piano, claiming they needed money for household expenses. She isolated Sophie from friends, monitored her every move, and made her feel like a burden in her own home. After her father died, things became unbearable. Diane announced she was selling the house and moving to Florida with her sister. Sophie, she declared, would be sent to live with her father's bitter cousin, Margaret, a woman who had made it clear she viewed Sophie as an unwelcome obligation. That night, Sophie had made her choice. She would rather face the unknown streets than another prison disguised as family. Lost in thought, Sophie didn't notice the traffic light had changed. She stepped off the curb into the crosswalk, her mind 1,000 miles away from the present moment. The screech of brakes shattered her reverie. Sophie turned her head just in time to see the sleek black Mercedes sliding toward her on the rain-slicked street. She tried to jump back, but her foot caught on the curb. The car's bumper barely touched her hip, but the shock sent her tumbling backward. Her backpack flew open, scattering her meager possessions across the wet pavement. The driver's door burst open immediately. A man emerged, tall and commanding, even in the downpour. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that was quickly being ruined by the rain, but he didn't seem to notice. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his gray eyes held a mixture of concern and relief as he rushed toward her.
"Are you hurt?"
"Don't move. I'm calling an ambulance." His voice was deep, authoritative, the kind of voice accustomed to being obeyed. "Oh, please. I'm fine." Sophie scrambled to gather her scattered belongings, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. The rain had soaked through her jacket, and she was shivering uncontrollably. It was my fault. I wasn't paying attention. The man knelt beside her, helping collect her things, despite the rain and the ruined suit. His hands paused when he picked up her journal, and Sophie saw him glance at the musical notations before carefully closing it and handing it to her. "You're a musician?" he asked, his tone gentler now. I want to be. "It's complicated." Sophie stuffed everything back into her backpack, avoiding his penetrating gaze. Up close, she could see he was probably in his late 30s, with a strong jawline and an intensity that was both intimidating and magnetic. "Let me at least drive you somewhere. You're soaked, and you're shaking. Where do you live?" "I don't." The words escaped before Sophie could stop them. She bit her lip, cursing her honesty. I'm between places right now. I'll find a shelter or something." "Really, I'm fine. Thank you for your concern." She tried to stand, but her legs were shaking from a combination of adrenaline, cold, and exhaustion. She'd been walking for hours before the accident, and her body was finally giving out. The man caught her elbow, steadying her. You're not fine. And I'm not letting you wander the streets in this condition. He studied her face, and Sophie saw something shift in his expression. Recognition of something, though they had never met. My name is Julian Blackwood. I have a penthouse apartment 3 blocks from here. You can get warm, dry off, and we can figure out your next step. No strings attached. Sophie should have refused. Every instinct screamed that accepting help from a strange man was dangerous, foolish, potentially disastrous. But something in Julian Blackwood's gray eyes held genuine concern, not predatory intent. And the alternative was wandering the rainy streets until she collapsed from hypothermia. Sophie Martinez, she whispered, and I don't have anywhere else to go. Julian's expression softened further. Then let's get you out of this rain. His penthouse was everything Sophie expected from a man who drove a Mercedes and wore custom-tailored suits. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Boston skyline, now blurred by rain and fog. Modern furniture and shades of gray and black gave the space a sophisticated but cold atmosphere. Everything looked expensive and untouched, as if no one actually lived there. The guest room is down that hall, second door on the right, Julian said, shrugging out of his ruined jacket. There should be towels in the bathroom. I'll find you some dry clothes, though they'll be too large. We can figure out something more permanent in the morning. Sophie asked, still standing near the entrance, dripping water onto the pristine hardwood floors. You don't know me. I could be anyone. Julian turned to face her fully, and for a moment, Sophie saw past the confident exterior to something wounded beneath. Because someone helped me once when I had nothing? Because you remind me that not everyone has a safety net. And because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because leaving you on the street would haunt me. 30 minutes later, Sophie emerged from the guest room wearing Julian's oversized Yale sweatshirt and sweatpants, her damp hair wrapped in a towel. She found him in the kitchen, heating soup on a state-of-the-art stove. Sit, he commanded gently, gesturing to the bar stools at the marble island. When did you last eat? Sophie had to think about it. Yesterday morning, I think. Maybe the morning before that. Julian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, simply ladling soup into a bowl and placing it before her with a spoon. As Sophie ate, he prepared a second bowl for himself and sat across from her. So, Sophie Martinez, who doesn't have anywhere to go, he said quietly. What's your story? Something about his tone, about the warmth of the soup in her belly, and the safety of being inside while rain lashed the windows, loosened Sophie's tongue. She found herself telling him everything. Her mother's death, her father's remarriage, Diane's cruelty, the years of having her dreams systematically destroyed, her father's death, and finally her escape. Julian listened without interrupting, his gray eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. I lost my mother when I was 20, he finally said. Cancer, like your father. She was a pianist too. Not professionally, but she played beautifully. After she died, I couldn't bear to hear piano music for years. It felt like losing her all over again. Sophie looked at him with new understanding. Is that why you stopped to help me? Because of my journal? Maybe partly, Julian admitted. But also because I see someone who's been broken by circumstances beyond her control, yet still carrying her dreams with her. That takes strength, Sophie. More strength than you probably realize you have. Their eyes met across the kitchen island, and something electric passed between them. Sophie felt her breath catch, suddenly aware of how intimate this moment was. Sitting in a stranger's kitchen wearing his clothes, sharing their deepest sorrows, Julian seemed to feel it too. He stood abruptly, clearing their bowls. You should rest. Tomorrow, we can discuss your options. I have connections in the music world. I might be able to help you find work, a place to stay, something. Why would you do that for me? Sophie asked, standing as well. You really don't know me. Julian turned from the sink, and the vulnerability in his expression took her breath away. Because maybe helping you will help me remember how to be human again. I've spent so long building walls, protecting myself, that I forgot what it feels like to simply care about someone without calculation. Before Sophie could respond, Julian's phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened instantly, the vulnerable man disappearing behind a mask of cold professionalism. I have to take this, he said curtly. Emergency business. The guest room is yours for as long as you need it. We'll talk more in the morning. He strode toward his study, already speaking in clipped tones to whoever was on the other end. Sophie stood alone in the kitchen, feeling the absence of his presence like a physical thing. She made her way to the guest room, which was larger than her entire bedroom at Diane's house had been. As she climbed into the impossibly soft bed, Sophie replayed the evening in her mind. The accident, Julian's inexplicable kindness, the connection she felt despite knowing him for mere hours. It was crazy. She should be terrified, planning her escape in the morning. Instead, for the first time in years, Sophie felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope in his study. Julian ended his call and stood at the window, staring out at the rain-soaked city. His reflection in the glass showed a man torn between desire and duty, between protecting himself and taking a risk on something unexpected. He thought about Sophie's green eyes, so full of pain and determination, about her music, which he had glimpsed in her journal, about the way she had looked at him with understanding when he mentioned his mother. This was dangerous. He knew that. He had sworn off emotional entanglements after Rebecca had destroyed his ability to trust. But something about Sophie Martinez felt different, genuine. Real Julian pressed his palm against the cold glass, making a decision that would change both their lives forever. Tomorrow, he would help her. He would give her space to heal, to grow, to rediscover her music. And maybe, just maybe, in saving her, he would find a way to save himself. 2. Sophie woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of fresh coffee. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the previous night came rushing back, and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. Julian Blackwood. The accident. The penthouse. Everything felt like a fever dream, too surreal to be real. She found Julian in the kitchen, dressed in a crisp navy suit, reading something on his tablet while sipping espresso. He looked up when she entered, and his expression softened in a way that made her stomach flutter. Good morning. I hope you slept well, he gestured to the coffee maker. Help yourself. I also had my housekeeper pick up some clothes for you. They're in the guest room closet. I guessed your size, so hopefully they fit. Sophie stared at him. You bought me clothes? Borrowed, technically, until you can shop for yourself. Julian set down his tablet. Sophie, I have a proposition for you. My personal assistant quit last week, and I need someone organized, trustworthy, and discreet. The job pays well, includes health insurance, and you could live here until you find your own place. You'd be earning your keep, not accepting charity. I don't have any experience as an assistant, Sophie protested, though her heart was already leaping at the possibility. But you have a college degree in music theory, which means you can organize, schedule, and handle complex information. You're intelligent and articulate. The rest I can teach you. Julian's gray eyes held hers steadily. I'm offering you a chance, Sophie. Not a handout. Right. A job. What you do with it is up to you. Sophie felt tears prickling her eyes. Why are you being so kind to me? Because kindness shouldn't be so rare that it requires explanation, Julian said simply. So do you accept? Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Yes, thank you. Over the next 2 weeks, Sophie threw herself into her new role with determination. Julian was demanding but fair, expecting excellence, but providing the tools to achieve it. She managed his schedule, screened his calls, organized his files, and slowly began to understand the empire he had built. Julian Blackwood was the founder and CEO of Blackwood Technologies, a software company that had revolutionized data security. At 38, he was worth billions, commanded respect in boardrooms worldwide, and maintained a reputation for brilliance and ruthlessness in equal measure. But Sophie was beginning to see beneath that polished exterior. She noticed how he never raised his voice at employees, how he remembered small details about their lives, how he donated anonymously to music programs for underprivileged children. He worked 16-hour days, not out of greed, but out of a driving need to prove himself worthy of his success, and he was lonely. desperately, achingly lonely in his glass tower. Their evenings fell into a comfortable routine. After work, they would share dinner and conversation. Julian asked about her music, encouraging her to use the baby grand piano in his rarely used formal living room. The first time Sophie played for him, she chose Chopin, and watched his eyes close with an expression of such profound emotion that she nearly stopped. When the final notes faded, Julian opened his eyes, and she saw they were bright with unshed tears. "My mother used to play that piece," he said quietly. "I haven't heard it in 18 years. Thank you for giving that back to me." Something shifted between them that night. The boundaries of employer and employee began to blur into something deeper, more complicated. Sophie caught herself watching him when he wasn't looking, noticing the strength in his hands, the intelligence in his eyes, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. And Julian, though he tried to maintain professional distance, found himself drawn to Sophie in ways that both thrilled and terrified him. Her laugh, her passion for music, her resilience in the face of hardship. Everything about her called to the parts of himself he had locked away after Rebecca's betrayal. 3 weeks after Sophie started working for Julian, everything changed. Sophie returned from lunch to find an elegantly dressed woman waiting in Julian's office. She was stunning, with platinum blonde hair, ice blue eyes, and a designer dress that probably cost more than Sophie made in a month. "You must be the new assistant," the woman said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I'm Rebecca Sterling, Julian's fiancée. Well, former fiancée, but these things are so fluid, aren't they?" Sophie felt her stomach drop. "Mr. Blackwood didn't mention he was expecting you." "Julian and I don't need appointments, darling. We have history." Rebecca's smile was predatory. 3 years ago, we were planning our wedding. I made a mistake. He overreacted, but now I'm ready to make amends. True love always finds its way back, don't you think? Before Sophie could respond, Julian emerged from the conference room, and his expression went cold when he saw Rebecca. "What are you doing here?" His voice could have frozen water. "I wanted to see you, to talk about us." Rebecca moved toward him with practiced grace. "Julian, it's been 3 years. Surely you can forgive me now. What we had was special. What we had was a lie." Julian's jaw was tight. "You slept with my business partner while wearing my engagement ring. There is no us, Rebecca. There never will be again. Don't be dramatic. It was one mistake. You've punished me long enough." Rebecca's eyes flickered to Sophie with calculation. "Or have you already replaced me with the help?" How deliciously predictable. "Get out," Julian said quietly, but with such intensity that Sophie took a step back. Now, Rebecca's perfect facade cracked slightly. "You'll regret this, Julian. I know things about you, about your patterns. How you rescue broken birds and discard them when they heal. Ask your new pet about the 3 women before her. Ask her if she's truly special or just another project." After Rebecca left, the office felt poisoned. Julian stood with his back to Sophie, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Is it true?" Sophie asked quietly. "Have there been others like me?" Julian turned, and the pain in his eyes made her chest ache. "There have been women I helped, yes. After Rebecca, I threw myself into work and philanthropy. I funded scholarships, helped employees in crisis, donated to causes. Some of those people were women who needed assistance. But you," he stepped closer, "you are not a project, Sophie. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Sophie felt tears building. "I'm what?" "You're the first person in 3 years who has made me want to feel again," Julian said softly. "Who has made me believe that maybe I could trust someone with more than just professional respect. That terrifies me because I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive being wrong again." Sophie wanted to close the distance between them, to tell him she felt the same terrifying pull. But Rebecca's words echoed in her mind. Rescue broken birds and discard them. Was that what this was? Was she fooling herself into believing there could be something real between a billionaire and a homeless girl he had literally hit with his car? That night, Sophie couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Rebecca's words, examining every interaction with Julian through a new, darker lens. Had his kindness been genuine, Or was she just the latest charity case that made him feel better about himself? Around midnight, she heard the piano. Julian was playing in the formal living room, and the melody was heartbreaking, full of longing and regret. Sophie found herself walking toward the sound. Drawn by a force she couldn't resist, Julian sat at the piano in the darkness, illuminated only by the city lights through the windows. His fingers moved over the keys with surprising skill, playing a piece Sophie recognized as one of his mother's favorites. "I didn't know you could play," she said softly from the doorway. Julian's hands stilled. "My mother taught me. After she died, I stopped. Until you came here and filled this place with music again." Sophie entered the room slowly. "Julian, I need to know the truth. Am I just another woman you're trying to save?" He turned to face her fully, and the vulnerability in his expression took her breath away. "Come here," Sophie approached until she stood beside the piano bench. Julian reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "I won't lie to you, Sophie. After Rebecca, I did throw myself into helping others because it was easier than dealing with my own pain. But you..." He pulled her down to sit beside him on the bench. "From the moment I saw you in the rain, something was different. It wasn't just wanting to help. It was wanting to know you, to hear your story, to be near you." "Rebecca said you discard women when they heal," Sophie whispered. "Rebecca doesn't know what she's talking about. The women I helped before found their own paths and moved on naturally. We parted as friends, not because I discarded them." Julian's thumb traced circles on her palm. "But with you, the thought of you leaving feels unbearable." "That's how I know this is different." Sophie searched his face. "I'm falling for you, Julian. And it scares me because we're from different worlds. You're a billionaire, and I'm nobody. You're not nobody." Julian's other hand cupped her cheek. "You're talented, resilient, kind. You're Sophie Martinez, who chose to chase her dreams rather than accept a prison. You're the woman who brought music back into my life, who made me remember how to smile, how to hope." "But what if Rebecca is right? What if you wake up one day and realize I was just a phase? Then I'll spend every day until then proving her wrong." Julian leaned closer, his breath warm against her lips. "Sophie, I haven't felt this way about anyone since before Rebecca destroyed my ability to trust. You've done something I didn't think was possible. You've made me want to try again." Sophie's resistance crumbled. She closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home. Julian responded immediately, his arms encircling her as the kiss deepened. Years of loneliness and pain melting away in the warmth of connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Julian rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Not as my assistant, not as my charity case. Stay with me as the woman I'm falling in love with." Sophie's heart soared and shattered simultaneously. "I want to, but I need to know this is real. I need time to trust that I'm not just fooling myself." "Then take the time you need," Julian said, though the disappointment in his eyes was clear. "I'm not going anywhere." Not fate, it seemed, had other plans. 2 days later, Sophie was leaving Julian's building to pick up lunch when a familiar voice stopped her cold. Well, if it isn't little Sophie, playing dress-up in expensive clothes." Sophie turned to find Diane standing on the sidewalk, her expression twisted with malice. Her stepmother looked older, harder, the years of bitterness etched into every line of her face. "How did you find me?" Sophie asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Did you really think you could just disappear? I have friends in this city, people who owe me favors. When I heard you were working for Julian Blackwood, I couldn't believe my luck." Diane stepped closer, and Sophie caught the stale scent of cigarettes. "You owe me, Sophie. Your father would have wanted you to help support me in my retirement." "I owe you nothing," Sophie said firmly. "You sold everything my father left for me, including my mother's piano. You made my life miserable for 9 years. I'm done with you." Diane's eyes narrowed. "You think your rich boyfriend will protect you? Men like him don't stay with girls like you. You're a novelty, a plaything. When he's bored, you'll come crawling back to me and I won't be so forgiving. She won't be coming back to you ever." Both women turned to find Julian standing behind them, his expression arctic. Sophie had never seen him look so dangerous. "Mr. Blackwood, I presume," Diane said, attempting a smile. "I'm Sophie's stepmother. We were just having a family discussion." "You're nothing to Sophie but a bully and a thief," Julian said coldly. "And if you ever come near her again, if you so much as think about her, I will ensure that every detail of your life is examined by lawyers, so thoroughly that you'll wish you had never heard the name Sophie Martinez." "Do I make myself clear?" Diane paled. "You can't threaten me." That wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Julian moved to stand beside Sophie, his hand finding hers. "Leave now." After Diane scurried away, Sophie sagged against Julian, the encounter leaving her shaken. He held her close, his hand stroking her hair. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered against his chest. "Yes, I did. Nobody threatens what's mine." He pulled back to look at her face. "If you'll let me protect you, that is." Sophie looked up at him, seeing not just the powerful billionaire, but the wounded man who had also lost so much. Rebecca's poisonous words lost their power in the face of this moment, this choice. "I'm yours," she said simply. "And you're mine, if you'll have me." Julian's kiss was his answer, fierce and possessive and tender all at once. When they finally pulled apart, Sophie saw her future reflected in his gray eyes. It was uncertain, potentially complicated, but undeniably real. That evening they talked for hours, addressing every doubt and fear. Julian told her about his life after his mother's death, about building his company from nothing, about Rebecca's betrayal and the 3 years of emotional isolation that followed. Sophie shared her own fears about being enough, about belonging in his world, about losing herself in someone else's life. "I don't want you to lose yourself," Julian said as they sat together on the couch. Sophie curled against his side. "I want you to find yourself. Pursue your music. Build your own career. I'll support you however I can, but this isn't about you becoming part of my world. It's about us creating a world together." Sophie felt tears of relief and joy sliding down her cheeks. "I love you, Julian Blackwood." "I love you too, Sophie Martinez." He kissed her forehead. "And tomorrow, I'm going to prove it." But neither of them could have anticipated how Rebecca's encounter would set off a chain of events that test everything they had just promised each other. The next morning, Sophie woke in Julian's arms for the first time. Sunlight filtered through the curtains of his bedroom, casting golden patterns across the sheets. She studied his face in sleep. The hard lines softened, the vulnerability he rarely showed visible in the peaceful expression. Her heart swelled with love so intense it almost frightened her. Julian's eyes opened slowly, and when he saw her watching him, he smiled. "Good morning, beautiful." "Good morning," Sophie whispered, still marveling that this was real. Julian pulled her closer, kissing her softly. "I meant what I said last night. I'm going to prove how much you mean to me. Starting today." After breakfast, Julian led Sophie to his study and opened his laptop. "I've been doing research. There's a music conservatory in Boston that offers programs for adult students. They have a scholarship fund that I happen to donate to. I'd like you to audition." Sophie's breath caught. "Julian, I can't accept that. It would be using your influence." "The audition is yours to pass or fail on your own merit," Julian said firmly. "I'm simply making sure you have the opportunity. What you do with it depends entirely on your talent. And Sophie, you have extraordinary talent." Tears filled her eyes. "You really believe in me?" "It's more than you believe in yourself," he said, cupping her face. "But that's going to change." Over the next few weeks, Sophie threw herself into preparing for the audition. She practiced for hours each day, her confidence growing with each piece she mastered. Julian would sit and listen whenever he could, and sometimes she would catch him watching her with such profound love that it took her breath away. Their relationship deepened in ways that felt both natural and miraculous. Julian was attentive and passionate, but also respectful, giving Sophie space to grow into her own person. They talked about everything from philosophy to their favorite foods, learning each other's histories and dreams. But happiness, Sophie was learning, was often fragile. 3 weeks after her audition at the conservatory, where she had performed brilliantly and been accepted with a full scholarship, Sophie returned to the penthouse to find Rebecca Sterling sitting in the living room with Julian. The woman's presence felt like poison in their sanctuary. Sophie. Perfect timing, Rebecca said with false sweetness. Julian and I were just discussing some interesting information I've uncovered. Rebecca, get out, Julian said, his voice dangerous. Not until I share what I've learned. Rebecca turned her cold gaze to Sophie. Did you know that Julian has rescued exactly 5 women in the past 3 years? Each one was in a desperate situation. Each one he installed in this very penthouse. Each one he supported, educated, and then discarded once they no longer needed him. That's not true, Julian said, standing abruptly. You're twisting facts to suit your narrative. Am I? Rebecca smiled cruelly. Jennifer Thompson, struggling artist. He supported her for 6 months until she got a gallery showing. Then she mysteriously moved to California. Lauren Hayes, former employee with medical debt. He paid everything, then she transferred to his Seattle office. Chloe Brooks, recovering addict. He funded her rehabilitation, and now she works for a competitor. See a pattern? Sophie felt sick, but she forced herself to meet Julian's eyes. Is any of that true? Julian's jaw tightened. Yes, but not the way she's presenting it. Those women were employees and friends who needed help. We parted on good terms when they were ready to move forward with their lives. There was never anything romantic with any of them. Except Sophie is different, isn't she? Becca leaned forward. She's living in your bedroom, not just the guest room. She's the first one you've actually fallen for, which makes her the most dangerous. Because when she leaves, and they always leave Julian, it will destroy you completely. Get out of my home, Julian said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. Now, before I call security, Rebecca stood gracefully. I'm leaving. But Sophie, darling, ask yourself this. When you're healed, when you're successful and independent, will he still want you? Or will he need someone new to rescue so he can feel like a hero? After Rebecca left, the silence was deafening. Sophie stood frozen, her mind racing. Julian approached her slowly, hands raised as if approaching a frightened animal. Sophie, please don't let her poison what we have. Did you help all those women? Sophie asked quietly.
Yes.
Yes, but they were completely different situations. There were no romantic feelings, no promises, nothing like what we have. Julian reached for her hands. Sophie, I love you. Only you. But she's right about one thing, Sophie said, tears spilling over. I was broken when you found me. You fixed me, gave me everything. And now, I'm accepted to the conservatory. I have money saved. I'm not the desperate girl you hit with your car. What happens when I don't need you anymore? You think I only love you because you needed me? Julian's voice cracked. Sophie, I fell in love with your strength, not your weakness. With your talent, your kindness, your spirit. Those things don't change whether you need my help or not. But doubt had taken root. Sophie pulled her hands away. I need time to think. I need to figure out who I am separate from you, separate from being someone you saved. Don't do this, Julian whispered, and Sophie saw tears in his eyes for the first time. Don't let her win. This isn't about her winning. It's about me knowing that what we have is real. Sophie's voice broke. I love you, Julian. But I need to prove to myself that I'm more than just another rescue project. How do I prove it to you? Julian asked desperately. Tell me what to do. You can't prove it. I have to discover it for myself. Sophie wiped her eyes. I'm going to stay with my friend Claire for a while, the one I reconnected with last week. I need space to breathe, to become who I'm meant to be. And then, Julian's voice was barely audible. And then, if what we have is real, we'll find our way back to each other. Sophie kissed him softly, tasting salt from both their tears. I love you. Please believe that. She packed a bag while Julian stood watching, his expression shattered. When she reached the door, she turned back one last time. Julian stood in the middle of his living room, looking more alone than she had ever seen him. It took everything in her not to run back to him. Goodbye, Julian, she whispered, and walked out. The next 4 weeks were the longest of Sophie's life. She threw herself into her studies at the conservatory, practicing until her fingers ached, taking theory classes and performance workshops. Claire, her college roommate, who had welcomed her without judgment, gave her space, but also support. Sophie excelled at the conservatory. Her professors praised her natural talent and emotional depth. She made friends with other students, joined a chamber music group, and slowly began to build an identity separate from being Julian Blackwood's girlfriend or charity case. But every night, she dreamed of him. Every song she played reminded her of the nights they spent at the piano together. She would catch herself reaching for her phone to call him, then stopping, knowing she needed to complete this journey alone. Julian, meanwhile, was falling apart. He stopped going to the office regularly, delegating responsibilities to his executives. He would sit at the piano for hours, playing the pieces Sophie loved, the house echoing with melancholy music. Marco, his loyal assistant, finally confronted him. "Sir, with all due respect, you need to fight for her. Grand gestures aren't your style, I know, but sometimes love requires us to be uncomfortable." She asked for space. Julian said hollowly, "I have to respect that." Respecting her wishes and giving up are two different things, Marco argued. She needs to see that you love her for who she is, not what she represents. So show her. That night, Julian made a decision. Began making calls, pulling strings, and putting a plan into motion that would either win Sophie back or prove to her that she was right to leave. On a Friday evening, for weeks after Sophie left, she received a mysterious invitation delivered to Claire's apartment. It was an embossed card inviting her to a special charity concert at Symphony Hall. The note that simply said, "Your presence would mean everything. You should go," Claire urged. "Even if it's not from Julian? It sounds amazing." Sophie's hands trembled as she held the invitation. Part of her knew exactly who had sent it. "What if I'm not ready? Are you happy without him?" Claire asked gently. Sophie thought about the past 4 weeks. She had grown tremendously, proven herself capable and talented. But there was an ache in her chest that never went away, a Julian-shaped hole that nothing else could fill. "No," she admitted. "I'm proud of myself, but I'm not happy." "Then maybe it's time to find out if you can be both," Claire said. Sophie wore a simple black dress she had bought with her own money from her conservatory stipend. She styled her hair in soft waves and wore her mother's silver locket. As she entered Symphony Hall, her heart pounded with anticipation and fear. The lobby was filled with Boston's elite, but an usher immediately approached her. "Ms. Martinez, please follow me." He led her not to a seat in the audience, but backstage. Sophie's confusion grew until she was ushered into a private room, where she found Julian. He looked thinner, tired, but his gray eyes lit up when he saw her. He wore a tuxedo that made him devastatingly handsome, and Sophie felt her resolve weakening immediately. "Thank you for coming," Julian said softly, not approaching her. "Wasn't sure you would." "What is this, Julian?" Sophie asked, her voice shaking. "This is me proving that I see you," he said. "Really see you. Sophie, I've spent the last month learning everything about your accomplishments at the conservatory. Your professors say you're one of the most talented students they've had in years. You've composed 3 original pieces. You're teaching piano to underprivileged children on weekends. You're building a life and career based on your own merit." Tears filled Sophie's eyes. "You've been keeping track of me?" "From a distance, with respect for your privacy," Julian said, "because I wanted to understand who you're becoming independent of me. And Sophie, the woman you're becoming is extraordinary. You always were, but now you believe it too." "Why am I here?" Sophie whispered. Julian took a deep breath. "Tonight's charity concert is to raise money for a new foundation I'm starting. It's called the Martinez Music Foundation. It will provide scholarships and instruments to talented students who can't afford music education. You're here because I want you to perform as the inaugural artist. Not because you're connected to me, but because you're the most talented pianist I know." Sophie's breath caught. "Julian, I can't." "Can," he said firmly. "There are 500 people out there who paid $1,000 a ticket just to attend. None of them know you're connected to me. You're here because I told them they would witness the debut of a remarkable new talent. Prove me right, Sophie. Not for me, but for yourself." "And after?" Sophie asked, tears streaming down her face. "What happens after?" Aunt Julian stepped closer, and Sophie could see he was fighting his own tears. "After, if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life loving you." Not as someone I rescued, but as an equal partner. As the woman who rescued me from a life of loneliness and fear. As my Sophie, who was brave and talented and strong enough to walk away when she needed to find herself. I love you, Sophie sobbed. I never stopped. Every day away from you hurt, but I had to know I could stand on my own. And now you know, Julian said, finally closing the distance between them and cupping her face. You can stand on your own. You just don't have to anymore. We can stand together. Their kiss was desperate and tender, filled with 4 weeks of longing and pain and love. When they pulled apart, Sophie was smiling through her tears. I'm terrified to perform in front of all those people, she admitted. I'll be in the front row, Julian promised. Sophie, whether you play perfectly or make 100 mistakes, I'll be proud of you. Because you're here, facing your fears, claiming your dream, that's all that matters. Sophie's performance that night was transcendent. She played 2 classical pieces flawlessly, then closed with one of her own compositions, a piece she had written about finding love in unexpected places. The audience gave her a standing ovation, and as she took her bow, she found Julian in the front row, tears streaming down his face, clapping harder than anyone else. After the concert, during the reception, Julian found her surrounded by admirers. Industry professionals offering opportunities and contacts. He hung back, letting her shine, until she caught his eye and excused herself. That was incredible, he said when she reached him. You were incredible. Thank you for giving me this chance, Sophie said, for believing in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. Julian took her hand. Sophie Martinez, I have one more thing to ask you tonight. To her shock, he lowered himself to one knee right there in the middle of the reception. The room went silent as everyone turned to watch. I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other for a few months. But Sophie, in that time, you've taught me how to feel again, how to hope, how to love without fear. He pulled a velvet box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring. I don't want to spend another day without you. Marry me. Be my partner, my equal, my everything. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you're not a rescue project, but the love of my life. Sophie looked at the ring, then at Julian's face, and finally at the crowd of people watching with eager anticipation. 6 months ago, she had been homeless and hopeless. Now, she was a successful music student, a scholarship recipient, a performer, and most importantly, a woman who knew her own worth. Yes, she said clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. Yes, Julian Blackwood, I'll marry you. The room erupted in applause as Julian slid the ring onto her finger and stood, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around. Their kiss was witnessed by 500 strangers, would later say they had never seen 2 people more perfectly matched. 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Sophie Martinez became Sophie Blackwood in an intimate ceremony at Julian's estate. Instead of a traditional wedding march, they walked down the aisle together to a piano piece Sophie had composed, called Coming Home. Claire was her maid of honor. Marco was Julian's best man, and 50 close friends and family witnessed their vows. Sophie had insisted on reconciling with her father's cousin Margaret, who attended with tears in her eyes, apologizing for her coldness and embracing Sophie with genuine warmth. Even Diane had sent a card, though Sophie had chosen not to invite her. Some bridges, she decided, were better left burned. During the reception, Sophie and Julian performed a piano duet they had rehearsed in secret. As their fingers danced across the keys in perfect harmony, everyone in attendance understood that this was more than a marriage. It was the joining of 2 souls who had found in each other the missing pieces of themselves. 1 year later, Sophie stood in the music room of what was now called the Martinez Music Center, watching 15 children from underprivileged backgrounds receive free instruments and scholarship certificates. The center, funded by Julian but operated independently by Sophie and a board of music educators, had become her passion project. She was also 6 months pregnant with their first child, a fact that filled both her and Julian with joy and wonder. Julian appeared in the doorway. Watching his wife with an expression of pure love, Sophie caught his eye and smiled, the kind of smile that said everything words couldn't express. That evening, as they sat together at the piano in their home, Julian's hand resting on Sophie's growing belly, they played together the melody that had started it all. The one Sophie had composed her first night in his penthouse, when she had been broken and lost, and he had been lonely and afraid. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophie asked softly. "Taking in a homeless girl you literally hit with your car." Julian laughed, kissing her temple. "Best accident of my life, though I prefer to think of it as destiny giving us both a push in the right direction." "I love you, Julian Blackwood," Sophie said, leaning into his warmth. "I love you too, Sophie Blackwood," he replied. "My wife, my partner, my home, their daughter. When she was born 3 months later, would be named Aria, and she would grow up in a house filled with music and love. Learning from her parents that the most beautiful symphonies often begin with the most unexpected notes, Sophie never forgot where she came from, the rain-soaked streets, the fear, the desperation, but she also never forgot that sometimes, in our darkest moments, fate intervenes. Sometimes a wrong turn leads to exactly where we were meant to be all along. And sometimes, the person who saves you ends up being the person you save in return. The End Decalogue. 5 years later, the grand opening of the Sophie Blackwood Performing Arts Academy was attended by over 1,000 people. The state-of-the-art facility, built on the grounds of what had once been an abandoned warehouse in South Boston, now housed practice rooms, concert halls, and classrooms where disadvantaged youth could study music for free. Sophie, now 30 years old and recognized as one of Boston's most promising composers and philanthropists, stood at the podium with Julian beside her and their 2 children, Aria and Marcus, playing in the front row under Claire's watchful eye. "5 years ago," Sophie began, her voice steady and confident, "I was homeless, scared, and convinced that my dreams were dead. Today, I stand before you not to tell you that one person saved me, but to tell you that sometimes saving yourself requires accepting help when it's offered. This academy exists because I learned that lesson. We all need help sometimes, and we all have the power to help others." She looked at Julian, who smiled at her with the same love and pride he had shown from the beginning. "My husband taught me that kindness isn't weakness, that vulnerability is strength, and that real love doesn't diminish us. It multiplies us. This academy is our gift to the next generation of musicians who just need someone to believe in them." The applause was thunderous. As Sophie cut the ribbon and tours of the facility began, she found Julian's hand and squeezed it. "We did it," she whispered. "No, Julian," corrected gently. "You did it. I just had the privilege of watching you soar." And as Aria ran to them, dragging her little brother by the hand, both of them chattering excitedly about the pianos they had seen, Sophie realized that Rebecca had been wrong about everything. Julian didn't collect broken birds to fix them. He simply recognized that everyone deserves a chance to heal, to grow, to become who they were always meant to be. And in helping others find their wings, he had finally found his own. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with love at first sight. Sometimes they begin with an accident, a moment of kindness, and 2 wounded souls brave enough to heal together. This was one of those stories, and it was far from over. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories. The Santa Monica Pier stretched out over the Pacific Ocean like a wooden finger pointing toward endless possibilities. Sophie Starling sat on her usual bench near the carousel, acoustic guitar resting comfortably against her body as if it were an extension of herself. The afternoon sun cast golden light across the weathered planks, and the salt air mixed with the scent of funnel cakes and popcorn from nearby vendors. This was her stage, her sanctuary, her way of keeping a promise she had made to her mother 3 years ago. Sophie's fingers moved across the strings with practiced ease, her voice rising above the ambient noise of tourists and seagulls. She sang an original song about finding light in the darkest moments, about trusting that tomorrow could be better than today. Her guitar case lay open at her feet, containing a modest collection of bills and coins from passers-by who stopped to listen. She never sang for the money, though she needed it. She sang because music was the language her soul spoke most fluently. The way she processed grief and transformed it into something beautiful. James Montgomery had been driving aimlessly for hours along the Pacific Coast Highway. His hands gripped the steering wheel of his black Tesla with unnecessary force, his knuckles white with tension. The funeral had ended that morning, but the emptiness inside him felt like it would never end. Emma, his 26-year-old sister, the only family he had left after their parents died in a plane crash 5 years ago, was gone. A drunk driver had stolen her life in an instant, leaving James alone in a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty. He was the founder and CEO of Montgomery Technologies, a company worth billions that specialized in artificial intelligence and machine learning. At 34, he had everything society told him should make him happy: wealth, success, influence, a penthouse overlooking the ocean. But none of it mattered now. Emma had been his anchor, the one person who saw him as just James, not the tech mogul or the billionaire. She had kept him grounded, made him laugh, reminded him that life was about more than quarterly earnings and stock prices. James parked his car without really knowing where he was and stepped out into the California sunshine that felt too bright for his mood. He walked toward the pier, his expensive Italian shoes making hollow sounds on the wooden planks. The sounds of laughter and music seemed obscene when his heart was breaking. But he kept walking, drawn forward by something he could not name. That was when he heard it. A voice, clear and achingly beautiful, singing words that seemed to reach inside his chest and touch the raw wound there. When the darkness feels too heavy and you cannot see the dawn, remember that the morning always comes to greet the sun. Hold on, just hold on, because love is stronger than the grave. James stopped walking. His breath caught in his throat. He turned toward the source of the voice and saw her, a young woman with auburn hair that caught the light like burnished copper, sitting on a bench with a guitar. She wore a simple yellow sundress and sandals, nothing designer or expensive. But she possessed a grace that money could not buy. Her eyes were closed as she sang, completely immersed in the music. And James found himself moving closer without conscious decision. He stood about 10 feet away, transfixed. The lyrics spoke directly to his pain, as if this stranger somehow knew exactly what he was feeling. Tears began to stream down his face, and for the first time since Emma died, he did not try to stop them. Other people walked past, some stopping to listen, some dropping money in the guitar case, but James could not move. He felt frozen in place by the power of this moment, by the inexplicable sense that he was exactly where he needed to be. When Sophie finished the song, she opened her eyes. Her gaze immediately found James, and something passed between them in that instant. Recognition, though they had never met. Connection, though they were strangers. She saw the tears on his face and the devastation in his eyes, and her expression softened with compassion. She did not look away, and neither did he. A small smile touched her lips, sad but genuine. She began playing another song, this one gentler, about finding peace in the midst of storms. James finally moved, walking slowly to an empty bench nearby. He sat down, not taking his eyes off her, and listened as she sang 3 more songs. Each one seemed to speak to a different part of his broken heart, offering comfort without demanding anything in return. When she paused to take a drink from her water bottle, James knew he had to say something, but words felt inadequate. What could he possibly say to explain what her music had just done for him? Sophie made the decision easier by standing up and walking over to him, her guitar hanging from a strap across her shoulder. "Hi," she said simply, her voice as warm in conversation as it was in song. "I noticed you've been crying. Are you okay?" James let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "No," he admitted. "I'm really not okay. But your songs just gave me the first moment of peace I've felt in days." Sophie sat down on the bench beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. From her backpack, she pulled out a small thermos and 2 paper cups. "I always bring extra," she explained, pouring what smelled like herbal tea into both cups. "Sometimes people need more than just music." James accepted the cup with trembling hands. "Thank you. I'm James." "Sophie," she replied. Sophie Starling. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping tea and watching the ocean. James found himself wanting to tell her everything, this stranger who somehow did not feel like a stranger at all. "I lost my sister 4 days ago," he said quietly. "Car accident. She was my only family." Sophie's eyes filled with tears of empathy. "I'm so sorry, James. Losing someone you love is like having part of your soul ripped away." She paused, then added, "I lost my mom to cancer 2 years ago. She was my best friend, my everything. Is that why you sing?" James asked. Sophie nodded. "She made me promise I'd keep singing no matter what. She always said that God gave me my voice to help heal people, including myself." She looked at James with those understanding eyes. "Sometimes the only way to survive the grief is to transform it into something that can help others." "Your mother was wise," James said, "and she was right about your voice. It's extraordinary." They talked until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sophie told him about her childhood, about learning to play guitar from her father, about the small apartments she shared with 2 roommates in Venice Beach. James found himself opening up in ways he never did. Even with his closest business associates, he told her about Emma, about their childhood, about how success had never filled the empty spaces in his life. "Will you be here tomorrow?" James asked as Sophie began packing up her guitar. "I'm here every day from 2 to 6, Sophie replied. "Same bench, same songs, though I try to write new ones when inspiration strikes." "Then I'll see you tomorrow," James said with certainty. Sophie smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I'll be here." As James walked back to his car, he realized that for the first time since Emma died, he was thinking about tomorrow instead of drowning in yesterday. He did not understand what had just happened, but he knew that meeting Sophie Starling was not a coincidence. It felt like grace, like an answer to a prayer he had not known how to pray. That night, James slept better than he had in days. And when he woke up, his first thought was not of loss, but of the auburn-haired singer who had reminded him that hope still existed in the world. James returned to the pier the next day at exactly 2 o'clock. He had canceled 3 important meetings and ignored dozens of emails from his executive team, something he had never done before in his entire career. His assistant, Patricia, had called him twice to confirm he was all right, and he had simply told her he needed a few days. For the first time in his life, work felt secondary to something else, something he could not quite name yet, but desperately needed to pursue. Sophie was already there when he arrived. Tuning her guitar with careful attention, she looked up as he approached, and her face lit up with a smile that made his heart beat faster. "You came back," she said, and there was genuine happiness in her voice. "I told you I would," James replied, sitting on the bench he had occupied the day before. "I couldn't stay away." Over the next 2 weeks, this became their routine. James would arrive at the pier every afternoon, and Sophie would sing while he listened. Between songs, they would talk about everything and nothing. She told him about her dreams of recording an album someday, about the children's hospital where she volunteered to sing for sick kids every Sunday morning. He told her about his company, about the pressure of running a business that employed thousands of people, about how he had lost himself somewhere. Along the way to success, Sophie never treated him differently when she learned the full extent of his wealth. She did not ask for anything or change the way she spoke to him. In fact, she seemed more interested in the James, who loved classic literature and had once dreamed of being a teacher, than in the billionaire who appeared on magazine covers. This was intoxicating to James, who had grown accustomed to people wanting something from him. One Thursday afternoon, as Sophie finished singing a particularly moving ballad about second chances, James made a decision. "Sophie, would you have dinner with me tonight? A real dinner, not just tea and conversation on this bench." Sophie hesitated, her fingers still resting on the guitar strings. "James, I need to be honest with you about something. I don't fit into your world. I live in a tiny apartment. I sing for tips, and I shop at thrift stores. If this is going somewhere, you need to know that I'm never going to be the kind of woman who attends fancy galas or wears designer dresses." And James reached across the space between them and took her hand. "Sophie, I don't want you to fit into my world. I want to find a new world that fits both of us. Please, just dinner. Nothing fancy, I promise." There's a small Italian place in Venice Beach that Emma used to love. They make the best lasagna you've ever tasted, and nobody there cares who I am." Sophie looked into his eyes and saw such vulnerability there that her defenses melted. "Okay," she said softly. "Yes, I'd love to have dinner with you." That evening at Mama Rosa's Italian kitchen, surrounded by checkered tablecloths and the scent of garlic bread, James and Sophie shared their first real date. They laughed more than James had laughed in years. Sophie told him embarrassing stories about her first open mic performances, and James admitted that he had once accidentally sent a text meant for his sister to his entire board of directors. The walls between them continued to dissolve, and by the time they shared a slice of tiramisu, James knew with absolute certainty that he was falling in love with her. 2 weeks later, Sophie performed at a charity event for homeless youth at a community center in downtown Los Angeles. James sat in the back row, watching her command the stage with nothing but her voice and guitar. The audience was completely captivated, and he felt an overwhelming pride mixed with something deeper. After the performance, a music producer approached Sophie with a business card, expressing interest in her work. On the drive back to her apartment, Sophie was quiet. "What's wrong?" James asked, sensing her conflict. "That producer offered to set up a meeting," Sophie said. "He thinks I could make it in the Christian music industry. But James, I'm afraid. What if I get caught up in that world and lose the reason I sing in the first place? What if it becomes about fame and money instead of ministry?" James pulled the car over and turned to face her. "Sophie, talent like yours is a gift that deserves to be shared with more than just the people who walk past the pier. I'm not saying you have to take every opportunity that comes your way, but don't let fear keep you from exploring what God might have planned for you." "You're right," Sophie admitted. "I just wish my mom was here to tell me what to do. She'd tell you to trust yourself," James said gently, "and she'd tell you that you don't have to walk this path alone." Their relationship deepened over the following months. James introduced Sophie to his closest friends. She brought him to her church, where he found himself genuinely moved by the worship and community. He had not been inside a church since his parents' funeral. But with Sophie beside him, singing with her whole heart, he felt something stirring in his own soul. Maybe faith was not about having all the answers. Maybe it was about being willing to trust in something bigger than yourself. In November, Sophie agreed to perform at a 3-day outdoor festival for a children's hospital fundraiser. The weather forecast predicted rain, but she was determined to keep her commitment. James begged her to at least wear a jacket, but Sophie insisted that her dress was fine, and that she would be moving around enough to stay warm. The rain started during the second day of the festival and did not stop. Sophie performed in the downpour for over 4 hours, refusing to leave the stage because she knew the children inside the hospital were watching on monitors. James stood in the rain beside the stage, holding an umbrella that Sophie would not use. Watching her give everything she had to bring joy to suffering children, by that evening, Sophie was shivering uncontrollably. James drove her home and insisted she take a hot shower and rest. But by midnight, she was burning with fever. James, who had stayed on her couch despite her roommate's curious looks, called an ambulance when her temperature spiked to dangerous levels. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed severe pneumonia. They admitted her immediately, and James refused to leave her side. For 3 days, he sat in that uncomfortable hospital chair, watching her struggle to breathe, watching machines monitor her vital signs, and praying prayers that came from a rusty faith being polished new again. On the 4th morning, Sophie's fever finally broke. James was dozing in the chair, his hand still holding hers, when he felt her fingers squeeze gently. His eyes flew open to find her looking at him with tired but clear eyes. "You stayed," she whispered through the oxygen mask. "Of course I stayed," James said, tears streaming down his face. "Sophie, I love you. I'm completely, utterly in love with you. When I thought I might lose you, I realized that you've become the most important person in my life." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, James. I think I have since that first day when you stood there crying while I sang. I felt something shift in my heart, like God was saying, this one matters." James leaned forward and kissed her forehead gently. "When you get out of here, I want to do this right. I want to meet your friends properly, take you on real dates, build something real with you." "I'd like that," Sophie said with a weak smile. But James, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to stop singing on the street or volunteering at the hospital or living simply. That's who I am. No, James replied. And I love exactly who you are. I don't want to change you, Sophie. I want to support you in being more fully yourself. Sophie spent another week in the hospital recovering. During that time, James barely left her side. He read to her from her favorite books, played music on his phone, and told her stories about Emma that he had never shared with anyone else. Sophie, in turn, shared her own stories about her mother, about the lessons she had learned, about the dreams she still carried, the day Sophie was released from the hospital. James drove her not to her apartment, but to his Malibu beach house. I want you to stay here while you recover, he said. You'll have your own room, complete privacy, and I've hired a nurse to check on you twice a day. Please, let me take care of you the way you've been taking care of my heart. Sophie looked at the beautiful house overlooking the ocean and then at James, whose eyes held such hope and love. Okay, she agreed, but only until I'm fully recovered. That evening, as they sat on the deck watching the sunset, James suddenly got down on one knee. Sophie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Sophie Starling, James began, his voice shaking with emotion. I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other for a few months. But when I almost lost you, I realized that life is too short to wait for the perfect moment. You walked into my life when I was drowning in grief, and you gave me a reason to believe in hope again. You taught me how to pray, how to laugh, how to feel. Will you marry me? He pulled out a simple but elegant ring, a single diamond on a platinum band. It was beautiful without being ostentatious. Perfect for Sophie's taste. Sophie was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, James, I'll marry you. You've given me something I thought I'd lost when my mom died. Someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves what they see. James slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her properly for the first time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors, two broken hearts began to beat as one. The wedding took place on a warm Saturday morning in March, 6 months after James had proposed. They chose a small stretch of private beach in Malibu, the same beach where James had proposed, where they had spent countless evenings talking about their future. Sophie had insisted on keeping everything simple and intimate, and James had happily agreed. This day was about their love and their commitment to each other, not about impressing anyone or making a social statement. Sophie wore a flowing white dress that she had found at a vintage boutique in Silver Lake. It was simple and elegant, with delicate lace sleeves and a skirt that moved beautifully in the ocean breeze. Her auburn hair was loosely curled and adorned with fresh white roses. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that reminded her of the ones her mother used to pick during their weekend walks. James wore a light gray suit with no tie, his shirt open at the collar, looking relaxed and genuinely happy in a way his business associates would hardly recognize. The guest list included only 50 people, Sophie's closest friends from church and the music community, her roommates who had become like sisters, the families from the children's hospital where she volunteered, Mama Rosa from the Italian restaurant, and even a few regular visitors from the pier who had watched their love story unfold. From James's side, there were his key executives who had become friends over the years. His college roommate who had flown in from New York, and Patricia, his assistant, who had watched him transform from a grief-stricken workaholic into a man who knew how to live. The ceremony was officiated by Pastor Michael from Sophie's church, a kind man in his 60s, who had counseled them through their engagement. He spoke about how God brings people together in unexpected ways, how sometimes the darkest moments in our lives lead us to the brightest blessings. Sophie cried through most of the ceremony, and James was not much better. Both of them overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them to this moment. When it came time for vows, Sophie went first. James, when I met you, you were a man carrying the weight of unbearable loss. I was just singing songs on a pier, trying to keep a promise to my mother. I never imagined that God would use my voice to heal your heart, and I definitely never imagined that you would heal mine in return. She paused, wiping tears from her cheeks. You've shown me that it's okay to dream bigger than I ever thought possible, that accepting help isn't weakness, but wisdom. You've supported every part of who I am without trying to change me. I promise to love you through every season, to be your partner in all things, and to remind you every day that you are so much more than your success. You are kind, generous, and the best man I've ever known. James's hands trembled as he began his vows. Sophie, before I met you, I was successful by every worldly measure, but I was empty inside. I had lost my faith, my joy, and my purpose. Then I heard you singing about hope, and something in me woke up. You didn't see a billionaire or a CEO. You saw James, just James, and you loved that person. His voice broke with emotion. You've taught me how to pray again, how to laugh again, how to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. I promise to protect your dreams as fiercely as I protect my own, to never let the world change who you are, and to spend every day of my life making sure you know how precious you are. You are my answered prayer, my second chance, my home. When Pastor Michael pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in applause and cheers. James kissed Sophie as the ocean waves crashed behind them, and in that moment, both of them felt the presence of the loved ones they had lost. As if Emma and Sophie's mother were there celebrating with them, the reception was held right there on the beach. With string lights hung between posts, long tables covered in white linens, and simple but delicious food from Mama Rosa's restaurant. Instead of a DJ, Sophie's musician friends formed an impromptu band, playing everything from worship songs to classic love ballads. As the sun began to set, Sophie picked up her guitar and sang a new song she had written specifically for this day, titled "Two Broken Pieces Made Whole." There was not a dry eye in the gathering. After the wedding, James and Sophie did not immediately jet off to some exotic honeymoon destination. Instead, they spent a quiet week at the beach house, cooking together, taking long walks on the shore, and simply enjoying being married. Sophie continued to sing at the pier twice a week because, as she explained to James, that was where their story had begun, and she never wanted to forget her roots. 3 months into their marriage, Sophie received a call from the music producer who had approached her after the charity performance. He had been following her journey and wanted to offer her a recording contract with a respected Christian music label. This time, with James's encouragement and Pastor Michael's guidance, Sophie felt ready to explore the opportunity. They met with the producer, a genuine man named Robert Chen, who shared Sophie's faith and understood her desire to stay true to her calling. "I don't want to make you into something you're not," Robert explained. "I want to help you reach more people with the gift God gave you. Your authenticity is what makes you special." Over the next 6 months, Sophie worked on her first album. James converted one of the rooms in their beach house into a home studio where she could write and practice. He sat in on recording sessions, offering support, but never trying to control the creative process. The album, titled Songs from the Pier, included the song she had been singing the day they met, "The Man Who Found Hope," which was her completed version of the song about James, and 11 other original compositions. When the album released in September, it exceeded everyone's expectations. It climbed to number 3 on the Christian music charts and received widespread acclaim for its raw honesty and beautiful melodies. Sophie began receiving invitations to perform at churches, conferences, and festivals across the country. James restructured his role at Montgomery Technologies, promoting his chief operating officer to handle day-to-day operations so he could travel with Sophie and support her growing ministry. They traveled together for the next year, and Sophie's influence grew steadily. She never forgot where she came from, though. In every city they visited, she would find a local park or public space and do a free concert. Just like her days at the Santa Monica Pier, she visited children's hospitals, sang at homeless shelters, and made time for anyone who wanted to share their story with her. James discovered a new purpose in using his resources to amplify Sophie's impact. He established the Emma Grace Foundation in memory of his sister, funding music therapy programs in hospitals and supporting young artists who wanted to use their talents for ministry. Working alongside Sophie, he found more fulfillment than he ever had in the tech industry. One evening in December, almost 2 years after they had met, Sophie and James were preparing for a concert at a large church in Austin, Texas. Sophie had been feeling tired and slightly nauseous for a few weeks, and James had been worried. That afternoon, she finally agreed to see a doctor. When Sophie emerged from the examination room, her eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. James jumped up from his chair in the waiting room, his heart racing. "What is it? Are you okay?" Sophie took his hands in hers. "James, I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." James felt the world tilt on its axis in the best possible way. He pulled Sophie into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We're going to have a baby." That night during the concert, Sophie made the announcement to the audience. "Before I sing my next song, I want to share some news. My husband and I just found out today that we're expecting our first child." The church erupted in applause and cheers. This baby is such a gift, such a reminder that God is always writing new chapters in our stories. My mother used to say that every child is a promise from heaven, and I finally understand what she meant. She sang a tender song about new beginnings, and there was not a person in that church who was not moved by the moment. James stood in the wings, watching his wife glow with joy and purpose. He thanked God for the day he had wandered to that pier in his darkest hour. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. Sophie continued performing until her 7th month, and then she and James returned to Malibu to prepare for the baby's arrival. They converted the guest room into a nursery, painting it soft yellow and decorating it with musical notes. James read every parenting book he could find. Sophie sang to her growing belly every night. Their daughter was born on a sunny morning in May, exactly 3 years after James and Sophie had first met. They named her Emma Grace Montgomery, honoring both of the women who had shaped their lives so profoundly. She had Sophie's auburn hair and James's blue eyes. And from the moment she entered the world, she was surrounded by love. Sophie took a few months off from touring to bond with Emma Grace, but she continued writing songs. Her second album, Legacy of Love, released when Emma Grace was 6 months old, and it became even more successful than the first. The title track, about passing faith and hope down through generations, became an anthem in churches across the country. As Emma Grace grew, she became a part of their ministry. Sophie would often bring her on stage during performances, and the sight of mother and daughter together touched hearts everywhere they went. James scaled back his business involvement even further, serving only as chairman of the board at Montgomery Technologies, so he could be present for every milestone in his daughter's life. 5 years after they met, on a warm afternoon in June, James, Sophie, and Emma Grace returned to the Santa Monica Pier. Sophie brought her guitar, and they sat on the same bench where everything had begun. A small crowd gathered as Sophie began to sing, and Emma Grace, now a precocious 4-year-old, stood beside her mother and sang along in her sweet, high-voiced. James watched his wife and daughter, overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. He thought about the broken man he had been, stumbling onto this pier with a shattered heart, and he marveled at the grace that had transformed his life. He thought about Emma, his sister, and felt certain that she would have loved Sophie and been the most amazing aunt to little Emma Grace. When Sophie finished singing, she looked at James with those same warm, understanding eyes that had captivated him from the first moment. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I'm thinking about how God answers prayers in ways we never expect," James said, pulling both his girls into his arms. "I came here looking for a reason to keep living, and I found everything I never knew I needed." Ow. Sophie kissed him softly. "We found each other," she corrected, "and together, we found our way home." Little Emma Grace tugged on her father's shirt. "Daddy, can we come back here next week? I want to sing for the people like Mommy does." James and Sophie exchanged a glance, both smiling. "Yes, sweetheart," Sophie said. "We can come back any time you want. This is a very special place for our family." As the sun began to set over the Pacific Ocean, the small family sat together on that bench, listening to the waves and watching the carousel spin. Tourists walked by, children laughed, and seagulls called overhead. It was an ordinary moment in an extraordinary life, a life built on faith, love, and the healing power of music. Sophie had kept her promise to her mother, using her voice to bless others. James had found his way back to faith and discovered a purpose bigger than business success. And Emma Grace was growing up surrounded by love, learning from her parents that the greatest gifts in life cannot be bought, only received with gratitude and shared with joy. Their story, which had begun with a sad millionaire and a singing woman on a pier, had become a testament to hope, to second chances, and to the beautiful way that God weaves broken threads into tapestries of grace. And this was not the ending, but rather the beginning of many more chapters yet to be written, many more songs yet to be sung, many more lives yet to be touched by the love that had changed everything between them. The music that had brought them together continued to flow through their lives, a constant reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is always a song of hope waiting to be heard. We just have to be willing to stop and listen. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories. Today I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story. Sophia Torres stood before the cracked mirror in her small bedroom. Smoothing down the emerald green dress her best friend Carmen had lent her that morning, her hands trembled slightly as she applied a touch of lipstick, the cheapest one she could find at the corner store. At 26 years old, she had never been on a real date before, and tonight felt like stepping into a world she had only seen in movies for the past 4 years. Sophia had worked as a housekeeper in the sprawling estate of James Whitfield, one of the wealthiest business owners in Los Angeles. His mansion was a palace of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and rooms so vast they seemed to echo with emptiness. Sophia knew every corner of that house, every surface she polished until it gleamed, every window she cleaned until it sparkled. But to James, she was practically invisible, just another part of the machinery that kept his life running smoothly. James was always courteous, always polite, but their interactions rarely went beyond a brief good morning or a thank you. He was a man consumed by his work, constantly on phone calls, rushing between meetings, living a life that seemed grand from the outside but hollow from within. Sophia had often wondered what it must be like to have everything money could buy, yet seem so distant from happiness. Tonight was supposed to be different for Sophia. She had met Ryan through a dating app 2 weeks ago, and his messages had been sweet and encouraging. He seemed kind, understanding, someone who might see beyond her modest circumstances. When he suggested meeting at the Golden Rose, an elegant restaurant downtown, Sophia felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this was her chance to be seen, to be chosen, to matter to someone. She clutched her small purse containing exactly $8. All she had left after paying her rent and sending money home to her mother in San Diego. Carmen had assured her the dress looked beautiful, that Sophia herself was beautiful. But as she made her way to the restaurant in her old car, doubt crept in like cold fog. The Golden Rose stood like a jewel box on the corner of 5th Street, its windows glowing with warm light and its entrance flanked by well-dressed couples. Sophia took a deep breath, stepped out of her car, and walked toward the heavy glass doors. The moment she entered, she felt the weight of eyes upon her. The other diners, dressed in expensive fabrics and dripping with jewelry, seemed to assess her instantly and find her wanting. A waiter approached with a professional smile that did not quite reach his eyes. She told him she was meeting someone, and he led her to a table near the window with a view of the city lights. The table was set for 2 with white linen, gleaming silverware, and a single rose in a crystal vase. Sophia sat down carefully, trying to remember all the etiquette rules Carmen had frantically taught her that afternoon. 8 o'clock came and went. Sophia checked her phone repeatedly, hoping for a message from Ryan explaining his delay. The waiter returned twice, asking if she would like to order, and each time she politely said she was still waiting. Other diners whispered and glanced her way, and Sophia felt herself shrinking under their scrutiny. By 8:30, the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Ryan was not coming. Sophia felt her throat tighten and her eyes burn with unshed tears. She had been foolish to believe that someone would actually want to be with her. It's foolish to think she could belong in a place like this. At 8:45, her phone buzzed. With shaking hands, she opened the message from Ryan. The words were brief and brutal. "Sorry, but I don't think this will work out. You're not really what I'm looking for. Good luck." The message hit her like a physical blow. Sophia sat frozen, staring at the screen as tears began to slide down her cheeks. She had been rejected before even getting a chance, dismissed as unworthy without a single conversation. The humiliation was suffocating. She needed to leave, to escape before she completely broke down in front of all these strangers. What? Sophia did not know was that across the restaurant, in a quiet corner booth, James Whitfield had been sitting alone for the past hour. His business dinner had been canceled at the last minute. He had decided to stay and have a quiet meal while reviewing some contracts. He had not planned to notice anything beyond his paperwork, but something had caught his attention. A familiar figure in an unfamiliar setting. At first, James had not recognized her. The woman sitting by the window looked elegant and lovely. Nothing like the housekeeper who moved quietly through his home in simple work clothes. But as he looked more closely, recognition dawned. It was Sophia. His Sophia. Except she had never been his, had she? She was just his employee, someone he barely spoke to beyond basic pleasantries. But tonight, seeing her in that green dress, with her dark hair falling softly around her shoulders, James saw her as if for the first time. How had he never noticed how beautiful she was? How graceful her movements, how expressive her eyes. For 4 years, she had been part of his daily life, and he had looked right through her. As James watched, he saw her checking her phone anxiously, saw the hope in her posture gradually deflate into disappointment. He saw the exact moment her phone buzzed, and the devastation that crossed her face as she read the message. Something twisted painfully in his chest. Who would do this to her? Who would be cruel enough to stand up such a remarkable woman? James found himself standing before he even realized what he was doing. His feet carried him across the restaurant toward her table, driven by an instinct to protect, to comfort, to somehow make things right. He had spent years building walls around his emotions, focusing solely on business and success. But seeing Sophia hurt shattered something inside those walls. When he reached her table, Sophia was gathering her purse, preparing to flee. She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes, and the shock on her face was almost comical. "Mr. Whitfield," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "Sophia," he said gently, surprised by the tenderness in his own voice. "May I sit down?" She looked confused, embarrassed, as if being caught in this vulnerable moment by her employer was the final humiliation. "I was just leaving," she said quickly, trying to wipe away her tears discreetly. "Please don't," James heard himself say. "Not yet. Not like this." There was something in his tone that made Sophia pause. She had heard him speak countless times over the years, always businesslike and distant. But this was different. This was human, real. She nodded slowly and sat back down. James took the seat across from her, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other. He could see her struggling to compose herself, to rebuild the walls of professionalism that had always existed between them. But he did not want those walls anymore. "I saw what happened," he said quietly. "Or rather, what didn't happen. Someone stood you up." Sophia felt her cheeks burn with shame. Of all the people to witness her humiliation, why did it have to be him? "Yes," she admitted, unable to meet his eyes. "I suppose I was foolish to think tonight would be different." "Different from what?" James asked, genuinely curious. "From every other time," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not the kind of woman men choose, Mr. Whitfield. I'm the kind they overlook." Her words struck James with unexpected force. How could she think so little of herself? How could she not see what he was only now beginning to see? "You're wrong," he said firmly. "And the man who stood you up tonight is a fool." Sophia looked up at him, searching his face for mockery or pity, but found neither. What she saw instead was something that made her breath catch. James Whitfield was looking at her the way she had always dreamed someone would look at her. Like she mattered. Like she was seen. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Why did you come over to my table?" James paused, asking himself the same question. Why had he crossed that restaurant? Why did seeing her in pain affect him so deeply? The answer, when it came, was both simple and terrifying. "Because I couldn't stand to see you hurt," he said honestly. "Because for 4 years you've been in my home, in my life, and I've been too blind to really see you. Until tonight." The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Around them, the restaurant continued its normal rhythm, but at their table, something extraordinary was beginning. Two people from completely different worlds were finally, truly seeing each other for the first time. "Have you eaten?" James asked, signaling to the waiter before she could protest. "I would be honored if you would join me for dinner." Sophia hesitated, thinking of the $8 in her purse, thinking of the impossibility of this situation. But something in James's eyes made her want to be brave, made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, tonight could still become something beautiful. "I would like that," she said softly, as the waiter approached with menus. James smiled at Sophia, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. And Sophia, despite everything that had happened, found herself smiling back. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment would change both their lives forever. The broken promise of a careless man had led to something neither expected, an unexpected connection that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love, class, and what truly matters in life. The waiter presented the menus with a flourish, but Sophia barely glanced at hers. Everything seemed impossibly expensive, each dish costing more than she made in a day. She felt James watching her, and when she looked up, he was smiling gently. "Order anything you like," he said. "Tonight, let's forget about everything else. Just be two people sharing a meal." His words were kind, but Sophia still felt the weight of their difference pressing down on her. "Mr. Whitfield, I appreciate this, but you don't have to, James," he interrupted softly. "Please, call me James. At least for tonight, can we set aside the fact that I'm your employer? Can we just be Sophia and James?" Something in his voice, a vulnerability she had never heard before, made her relax slightly. "James," she repeated, testing how his name felt on her lips. It felt natural, right, as if she had been waiting years to say it this way. They ordered their meals, and as they waited, an unexpected ease settled between them. James asked her about her evening, and Sophia found herself telling him about Ryan, about the 2 weeks of messages that had made her feel special, about the hope that had bloomed and then died in the span of a few hours. "He said I wasn't what he was looking for," Sophia said, her fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. "I think he saw my profile and decided I wasn't good enough. Not educated enough, not successful enough, just not enough." James felt anger rise in his chest, not at Sophia, but at a world that had made her feel this way. "His loss is immeasurable," he said firmly. "And if I'm being honest, I'm grateful to him." Sophia looked up in surprise. "Grateful? Why?" "Because if he had shown up tonight, I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now," James said, holding her gaze. "I wouldn't have finally opened my eyes to see what's been in front of me all this time." Their food arrived, and the conversation shifted naturally to other topics. Sophia talked about her childhood in San Diego, about her mother who cleaned houses to put food on the table, about her younger brother who was studying engineering at community college thanks to the money Sophia sent home each month. Her voice filled with warmth when she spoke of her family, and James found himself captivated by her animated expressions, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the people she loved. "My dream," Sophia confessed, "is to own a small bakery someday. Nothing fancy, just a neighborhood place where people feel welcome. I love baking. It's the one thing that's always brought me joy. Sometimes on my days off, I make pastries and take them to the community center near my apartment." James listened, realizing he knew nothing about this woman who had been part of his daily life for 4 years. He had never asked, never wondered, never cared to look beyond the surface. The realization shamed him. "What about you?" Sophia asked, surprising him with her directness. "What's your dream, James? What do you want beyond business deals and board meetings?" The question caught him off guard. No one asked him things like that. People asked about his companies, his investments, his strategies, but never about his dreams. "I don't know anymore," he admitted. "I think I stopped dreaming a long time ago. My father built this empire and handed it to me. I've spent my entire adult life maintaining it, growing it, but I'm not sure I ever chose it. Sophia leaned forward, genuinely interested. If you could do anything, be anyone, what would you choose? James thought for a long moment, and a truth he had never spoken aloud surfaced. I think I'd want to be a teacher. History, maybe, or literature. Something that matters to people, that shapes minds and touches lives. My grandfather was a teacher before my father pulled him into the family business. He was the happiest person I ever knew. Then why don't you? Sophia asked simply. Because it's not that easy, James said with a sad smile. There are expectations, responsibilities, hundreds of people who depend on the company for their livelihoods. You can't just walk away from that. Maybe not, Sophia agreed. But you could find a way to do both. You could teach part-time, volunteer, mentor students. There's always a way to feed your soul, James, even when duty feeds your body. Her wisdom struck him deeply. Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter about life's unfairness, yet she spoke with hope and possibility. She worked a job that many would consider beneath her talents. Yet she found joy in baking for strangers at a community center. She had been rejected and humiliated tonight, yet she sat here with grace and kindness. As the evening progressed, James found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. He spoke about the loneliness of his childhood in a house full of staff, but empty of affection. He described his parents' cold marriage, more business partnership than love story. He admitted that at 42 years old, he had dated many women, but never truly connected with any of them. They see the money, the lifestyle, the opportunities I represent, he said. But no one sees me, the real me. The man who sometimes wishes he could just be ordinary, have simple Sunday dinners with family. Worry about everyday things instead of stock markets and merger agreements. Sophia reached across the table and, in a gesture that surprised them both, placed her hand over his. I see you, James. Maybe for the first time. We're both really seeing each other. The touch of her hand sent warmth through him. A feeling he could not quite name, but that felt like coming home after a long journey. They sat like that for a moment, connected across a table in a restaurant full of strangers. Two souls recognizing something essential in each other. When the waiter brought the check, James paid without hesitation, brushing aside Sophia's half-hearted protest. They walked out into the cool Los Angeles night, neither wanting the evening to end. The city lights sparkled around them, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from nearby gardens. Thank you, Sophia, said as they stood by her car. This night started as the worst of my life, but you turned it into something beautiful. I'll never forget your kindness. It wasn't kindness, James said, stepping closer. It was selfishness. I didn't want to see you leave. I didn't want to lose the chance to know you. Sophia looked up at him, and in the glow of the streetlights, James thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Not because of the dress or the makeup, but because of the light that came from within her, a light that had always been there, but that he had been too blind to see. Can I see you again? He asked, his voice uncertain, in a way that was completely foreign to him. Not as employer and employee, but as James and Sophia. Can we do this again? Sophia knew she should say no. She knew that crossing this line could complicate everything, could cost her the job she desperately needed, could end in heartbreak when reality reasserted itself. But looking into James's eyes, seeing vulnerability and hope reflected there, she found herself nodding. Yes, she whispered. I'd like that very much. James smiled, and before he could second-guess himself, he leaned down and gently kissed her forehead. It was a chaste kiss, respectful, but it promised something more, something neither of them quite dared to name yet. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. We'll figure this out together. As Sophia drove home that night, her mind spun with the impossibility and wonder of what had happened. She had gone to that restaurant expecting nothing and had found something she never knew she was searching for. A connection that transcended all the barriers society had built between people like her and people like James. Meanwhile, James stood in the parking lot long after her car had disappeared, feeling more alive than he had in years. The careful, controlled life he had built suddenly seemed like a cage, and Sophia was the key that might finally set him free. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the mansion for work with butterflies in her stomach. She half expected everything to have changed, for James to pretend the previous night had never happened. But when she entered through the kitchen door, she found him there, something that had never happened before. He was making coffee, and when he saw her, his face lit up with a genuine smile that took her breath away. "Good morning, Sophia," he said warmly. "I made extra coffee. Would you join me on the terrace for a few minutes before you start your day?" It was a simple invitation, but it held the promise of something more. As they sat together watching the sunrise, sipping coffee, and talking easily, both knew their lives had irrevocably changed. The question was not whether they felt something powerful between them. That was undeniable. The question was whether they had the courage to pursue it. Despite everything that stood in their way, over the following weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Sophia worked during the day, maintaining professionalism, but in the evenings, after her official hours ended, they would meet. Sometimes they cooked dinner together in his vast kitchen, James learning to make her grandmother's recipes while Sophia taught him with patient humor. Sometimes they watched old movies in his home theater, sitting close enough to feel each other's warmth. Sometimes they simply talked for hours, sharing dreams and fears and everything in between. James discovered that Sophia had a quick wit that made him laugh, something he had not done freely in years. She introduced him to her world, taking him to the community center where she volunteered, showing him the small joys she found in everyday life. Through her eyes, he began to see richness and simplicity, value in things money could not buy. Sophia, for her part, saw depths in James that his public persona never revealed. She learned about his secret donations to schools and hospitals, contributions he never publicized. She discovered his love of poetry, finding worn volumes of Pablo Neruda and Rumi hidden in his study. She realized that beneath the businessman was an artist's soul, starved for beauty and meaning. But their growing closeness could not remain secret forever, and when the world discovered their relationship, they would face their greatest test. The turning point came on a Friday evening 6 weeks after that fateful night at the Golden Rose. James had invited Sophia to a charity gala, a public event where his appearance always attracted attention. For weeks he had been carefully introducing the idea of their relationship to his inner circle, testing the waters, but nothing had prepared either of them for the storm that would follow. Sophia wore a stunning navy blue gown that James had insisted on buying for her, and when they arrived at the Beverly Hills Hotel together, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions, society matrons whispered behind their champagne glasses, and James felt Sophia's hand tremble in his. "We can leave if you want," he murmured in her ear. "Just say the word." But Sophia straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "No," she said firmly. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of feeling like I should be ashamed of who I am or what I feel for you." Her courage humbled him. Together, they walked into that ballroom like warriors entering battle, and in many ways, that's exactly what it was. The reactions were immediate and brutal. Eleanor Whitfield, James's mother, cornered them within minutes. Her diamond necklace glittered coldly as she looked Sophia up and down with undisguised contempt. "James, darling," she said in a voice dripping with false sweetness, "who is your little friend?" "Mother," James said with steel in his voice, "this is Sophia Torres. The woman I love." Words hung in the air like a thunderclap. It was the first time James had said them aloud, the first time he had claimed their relationship so publicly, so definitively. Sophia's eyes flew to his face, wide with shock and something that looked like joy. Eleanor's face hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. She's your housekeeper, for heaven's sake. This is some sort of rebellion phase, and it ends tonight." "No, Mother," James said calmly. "What ends tonight is me living according to your expectations instead of my own heart. Sophia is not a phase. She is the most real, most honest, most beautiful thing that has ever happened to me." Other guests were gathering now, sensing drama, their phones undoubtedly recording every word. Eleanor realized she was losing control of the situation and changed tactics. "Think about the family reputation," she hissed. "Think about the business. Your board of directors will never accept this. You're throwing everything away for what? For her?" "Yes," James said simply. "For her, and I'd do it again every single time. Sophia felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. She would not give these people the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said with quiet dignity, "I understand that you don't approve of me, and I can accept that. But I want you to know that I love your son with all my heart. Not his money, not his status, just him. The man who makes me laugh, who listens to my dreams, who sees me as I truly am. And I think he deserves to be loved that way." Something flickered in Eleanor's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, James's younger sister Amanda pushed through the crowd. Finally, Amanda said with a genuine smile, approaching Sophia and taking her hands, "Someone real. Thank God. I was beginning to think James would end up with another one of those plastic society clones who only wanted his credit cards." The unexpected support shifted the atmosphere slightly. Amanda had always been the rebel of the family, the one who had walked away from the family business to become a social worker. She had felt the same suffocating expectations James had lived under, but the battle was far from over. In the days that followed, the media exploded with the story. Billionaire's Cinderella romance screamed one headline. Whitfield air dates his maid declared another, the word maid dripping with condescension. Online commenters were vicious, some claiming Sophia was a gold digger, others accusing James of exploiting an employee. The pressure came from all sides. The Whitfield family board of directors called an emergency meeting, threatening to remove James from his position as CEO unless he ended the relationship. His mother organized interventions with therapists and lawyers. Business partners distanced themselves, afraid of being associated with scandal. But the most painful attacks came at Sophia from her own community. Some of her friends accused her of betraying her roots, of thinking she was better than them now that she was with a rich man. Women at the community center where she volunteered stopped speaking to her. Anonymous messages called her a sellout, a traitor to her class. One evening, Sophia found James in his study, staring at financial reports with a troubled expression. "The board gave me an ultimatum," he said quietly. "End things with you, or they'll force me out of the company my family spent generations building." Sophia felt her heart crack. She had known this might happen, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. "Then you should end it," she said, her voice breaking despite her effort to sound strong. "I won't let you lose everything because of me." James stood up and crossed to her in 3 quick strides, pulling her into his arms. "Don't you understand?" he said fiercely. "Without you, I have nothing that matters. That company, that money, that life, it's all empty. You filled a space in my heart I didn't even know was hollow. I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving you up, but your family, your work, everything you've built," Sophia protested. "I haven't built anything," James said. "I've maintained a legacy that was never truly mine. But with you, I can build something real. Something that belongs to us. I don't care if I have to start over. I don't care if we have to struggle. As long as I have you, I have everything." Sophia looked up at him through tears, and in that moment she knew with absolute certainty that this man loved her. Not for what she could give him, not for how she made him look, but for who she was in her deepest self. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Then be terrified with me," James said, kissing her with a passion that spoke of commitment and promises. "Let's choose each other every single day, no matter what the world throws at us." The next day, James called a press conference. With Sophia standing beside him, he addressed the cameras and the world. His statement was simple and powerful. "My name is James Whitfield, and I am in love with Sophia Torres. She is not my maid, though she has worked in my home with dedication and grace. She is not my scandal, though many want to make her one. She is my partner, my equal, and the woman I intend to spend my life with. I am stepping down as CEO of Whitfield Industries to pursue a life that honors my truth and my heart. To those who judge us, I say this: you don't know what love is until you find someone who sees you completely and loves you anyway. I found that with Sophia, and no amount of money or prestige could ever compare to that gift." The press conference went viral. Reactions were mixed, but something unexpected happened. People began sharing their own stories of love across social boundaries. Workers who had fallen for bosses, students who had loved teachers, people from different religions and cultures who had found each other despite opposition. The conversation shifted from scandal to inspiration. James's mother eventually came around. Softened by Amanda's persistent advocacy and by seeing the genuine happiness in her son's face. The board replaced him, but James discovered freedom in letting go. He began teaching history at a local community college, finding fulfillment he had never known in the corporate world. He still had wealth from personal investments, more than enough for any life they wanted to build. Sophia opened her bakery with James's support, not his money. She took out a small business loan and worked day and night to make it succeed. The neighborhood embraced her shop, and it became a gathering place for people from all walks of life. James often helped in the mornings before his classes, and regulars loved seeing the former billionaire CEO serving coffee with flour on his shirt. 6 months after that fateful charity gala, James proposed to Sophia in the kitchen of her bakery. Surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of ovens, the ring was simple. Not the massive diamond his mother had insisted he should buy, but a delicate band with a small sapphire that reminded him of the dress she had worn on their first night together. "Marry me," he said, kneeling on the flour-dusted floor. "Not because of what we were, but because of what we are. Two people who found each other when we weren't even looking, who chose each other when the world said we shouldn't, who built something real from what everyone thought was impossible." "Yes," Sophia said through happy tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Their wedding was small, held in the garden of Amanda's house, attended by the people who truly mattered. Sophia's mother cried throughout the ceremony, not from sadness but from joy at seeing her daughter so loved. James's mother surprised everyone by embracing Sophia warmly, whispering an apology for her initial cruelty. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, James held Sophia close and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me what really matters." "Thank you for seeing me," Sophia whispered back. And in that garden, surrounded by loved ones under a sky full of stars, two people who should never have met, who came from worlds that were never supposed to touch, proved that love recognizes no boundaries when it's real, that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places, that being seen, truly seen, by another person is worth more than all the wealth in the world. Their story did not end with that wedding, of course. It was just the beginning of a lifetime of choosing each other, of building a life that honored both their dreams, of proving every day that love, when it's genuine and brave, can cross any divide and create something beautiful from what the world insists should remain separate. And somewhere in Los Angeles, in a little bakery that smelled of cinnamon and hope, their story inspired others to believe in the impossible, to see beyond surfaces, to recognize that the most profound connections often come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it takes being humiliated on a blind date with only $8 in your purse to find the love of your life sitting across a restaurant, finally opening his eyes to see what had been there all along. Sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what truly matters. And sometimes love is simply two people deciding that together is better than apart, no matter what anyone else thinks. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories. Elena Rivera smoothed the silk fabric of her emerald evening gown for what felt like the 100th time that evening. The Grand Millennium Hotel. Ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the expensive jewelry adorning the necks of Seattle's elite. She stood near the champagne fountain, watching her husband Graham. Whitmore worked the room with the practiced ease of someone born into wealth and privilege. 5 years ago, Elena had been a rising curator at the Northside Contemporary Art Gallery, passionate about discovering new artists and bringing their visions to life. Then she met Graham at an exhibition opening, and everything changed. He swept her off her feet with romantic dinners, weekend getaways, and promises of a life where she would never have to worry about money again. Within 6 months, they were married. Within a year, Graham had convinced her that working was unnecessary, that she should focus on being the perfect wife, hosting dinner parties. In supporting his career, Alina took a sip of champagne, the bubbles doing nothing to ease the growing discomfort in her chest. She had been standing alone for the past 20 minutes while Graham networked with potential clients and business partners. She decided to join him, thinking perhaps she could contribute to the conversation. After all, she had a master's degree in art history and had once been quite good at reading people and making connections. She approached the circle where Graham stood with 3 other men in expensive suits. They were discussing a real estate development project downtown. Alina recognized one of the men as Lawrence Bennett, a prominent developer whose wife collected contemporary art. She had actually helped Mrs. Bennett acquire several pieces years ago. "Graham," she said softly, touching his arm. "Mr. Bennett, it is wonderful to see you again. How is Patricia? I heard she just opened a private gallery space in your Belltown building." Graham's body went rigid. His jaw clenched in that way Alina had learned to recognize over the years. The way that meant she had done something to displease him. Lawrence Bennett smiled politely, clearly not remembering her, which stung more than she expected. Before she could say anything else, Graham turned to her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. His hand gripped her elbow firmly, painfully. "Darling, why don't you go check on the silent auction items? I think you mentioned wanting to bid on something." "I thought I could join the conversation," Alina replied, confusion mixing with the first stirrings of hurt. "I actually know quite a bit about the art scene in that neighborhood." The look Graham gave her could have frozen fire. Then he leaned in close, his voice low enough that only she could hear, but his words cut through her like shattered glass. "Stay away, you are embarrassing me. Go find something else to do." The world seemed to tilt. Alina felt heat flood her face as the men in the circle shifted uncomfortably. Clearly having heard enough to understand what was happening, one of them, a younger man with kind eyes, looked away as if to give her privacy in her humiliation. But there was no privacy, not really. Several other guests had noticed the exchange. Alina could feel their eyes on her, some pitying. Others merely curious about the drama unfolding. She stepped back, pulling her arm from Graham's grip. Her throat felt tight, but she refused to cry. Not here, not in front of all these people. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor with each measured step. She did not run. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her completely fall apart. Alina found refuge near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Seattle sparkled below, thousands of lights representing thousands of lives, all of them suddenly seeming more appealing than her own. She pressed her fingertips against the cool glass, trying to ground herself, trying to remember how to breathe normally. How many times had this happened? How many times had Graham dismissed her, diminished her, made her feel small? She had made excuses for years. He was stressed from work. He was worried about appearances. He was protecting his business relationships. But standing there, looking at her reflection in the window, a beautiful woman in an expensive dress who felt absolutely worthless, Alina finally admitted the truth to herself. This was not about stress or appearances. This was about control, and she had given him complete control over her life. Behind her, she heard women talking, their voices carrying in that way people's voices do when they think they are being discreet, but really are not. That is Graham Whitmore's wife. Poor thing, he treats her like an accessory. I heard he has a mistress in Portland, young associate at his firm. Everyone knows except her, apparently. Alina's hands trembled. She turned slightly and saw the 2 women, both dripping in diamonds, both wives of Graham's colleagues. They noticed her looking and had the grace to appear embarrassed before moving away. But the damage was done. The words hung in the air, confirming what Alina had suspected but been too afraid to acknowledge. She made her way to the ladies' room, needing a moment alone to process everything crashing down around her. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, designed to make wealthy women feel pampered. Alina stared at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was still perfect. Her hair was still elegantly styled. Her dress probably cost more than some people made in a month. But inside, she felt hollow, carved out, got a beautiful empty shell. The door opened and an older woman entered, someone Alina vaguely recognized from previous events. The woman paused, taking in Elena's expression with surprising insight. "My dear," she said gently, "whatever you are thinking about doing, do it. Life is far too short to spend it making yourself smaller for a man who cannot see your worth." Alina met the woman's eyes in the mirror. "How did you know?" "Because 30 years ago, I stood exactly where you were standing," the woman replied. "I stayed. I regret it every single day. Don't make my mistake." After the woman left, Alina remained in the bathroom for several more minutes, something crystallizing inside her. She thought about the girl she used to be, the one who spent hours in galleries, who could talk for days about the interplay of light and shadow in a painting, who had dreams and ambitions and fire. What had happened to that girl? When had she traded her identity for the false security of Graham's money and status? Alina pulled out her phone and called her younger sister, Monica, the only family member she had maintained close contact with after her marriage. Monica answered on the second ring. "I need a place to stay tonight," Alina said simply. Monica did not ask questions, did not hesitate. "I will be there in 20 minutes. "Where are you?" "The Grand Millennium." "I will wait outside." Alina walked back into the ballroom one last time. Graham was still networking, still smiling, still playing the role of the successful businessman. He glanced her way briefly, and she saw the flicker of annoyance in his eyes, probably expecting her to apologize for earlier. Instead, she held his gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the exit. She left her coat behind. She left the expensive purse Graham had given her for their anniversary. She left behind 5 years of pretending, of shrinking, of losing herself piece by piece. The cool Seattle air hit her face as she stepped outside, and despite everything, despite the pain and humiliation and fear of what came next, Alina felt something she had not felt in years. She felt free. Monica pulled up in her modest sedan 30 minutes later, and Alina climbed in without looking back at the gleaming hotel behind her. Her sister reached over and squeezed her hand. "You okay?" "No," Alina admitted. "But I will be." That night, sleeping on Monica's couch in her small apartment, Alina made a decision. She would not go back. She would not accept Graham's apologies or excuses or promises to change. She had spent 5 years of her life being someone's embarrassment. It was time to remember who she was before Graham Whitmore. More importantly, to discover who she could become without him. The next morning, Alina woke early and sent Graham a text message. 3 simple words that felt like reclaiming her entire existence. "I want a divorce." His response came within minutes. Full of anger and disbelief. "You are overreacting. Come home and we will talk about this." But Alina did not respond. She blocked his number, then called a divorce attorney her sister recommended. The woman's voice on the phone was warm and professional. "Tell me your story," the attorney said, and for the first time in 5 years, Alina did. She told the truth about her marriage, about the isolation, the control, the constant diminishment of her worth. She cried as she spoke, but they were not tears of weakness. They were tears of release, of finally acknowledging what she had endured, of choosing herself for the first time in far too long. The road ahead would not be easy. Alina had no job, limited savings of her own, and would have to rebuild her entire life from the ground up. But as she sat in Monica's tiny apartment, drinking cheap coffee and making plans, she felt more alive than she had in years. Graham Whitmore had told her to stay away because she embarrassed him. He was about to learn that the woman he had tried so hard to diminish was far stronger than he ever imagined, and his humiliation of her would become the catalyst for her greatest transformation yet. 3 months had passed since Alina walked out of the Grand Millennium Hotel, and her life looked nothing like it had before. She lived in a small studio apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, a space barely large enough for a bed, a kitchenette, and a small table she used for both dining and working. The walls were thin, the plumbing occasionally groaned, and the heating was unpredictable. But it was hers, paid for with money she earned herself. And that made it more valuable than the sprawling house she had shared with Graham. The divorce proceedings were moving slowly, tangled in the web of Graham's expensive lawyers, who seemed determined to drag everything out as long as possible. He had contested everything, claiming Alina had been a gold digger from the start, that she had manipulated him into marriage. The accusations stung, but Alina had learned to let them bounce off her. She knew the truth, and that was enough. Finding work had been harder than she expected. 5 years away from the art world felt like a lifetime. Galleries wanted current experience, references from recent positions, proof that she was still connected to the contemporary art scene. After dozens of rejections, Alina had almost given up when she walked past a small gallery tucked between a bookstore and a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The space was modest. Nothing like the prestigious galleries where she had worked before, but something about it called to her. The window display featured works by local artists, pieces that showed genuine talent and vision rather than the calculated commercial appeal of high-end galleries. Alina stood outside for several minutes, rain soaking through her coat, staring at a particular painting of the Seattle skyline rendered in bold, emotional brushstrokes. The door opened, and a woman in her early 60s stepped out. Her silver hair pulled back in a casual bun, her eyes sharp and kind behind purple-framed glasses. "You have been standing out here for 10 minutes, the woman said with a slight smile. "Either you really love that painting, or you are working up the courage to come inside." Alina felt her face flush. "I used to work in galleries," she admitted. "Before everything changed. I was just remembering what that felt like." The woman studied her for a moment, then extended her hand. "Diane Foster. I own this place. Come in and get out of the rain." Inside, the gallery was warm and welcoming, filled with carefully curated pieces that showed Diane's discerning eye. Alina found herself relaxing as Diane made tea, and they talked about art. About the challenges of running an independent gallery. About the importance of supporting emerging artists rather than just chasing trends and profits. "I had a young woman helping me," Diane said after an hour of conversation, "but she just got accepted into a graduate program in New York. Left 2 weeks ago. I have been drowning in paperwork and inventory management ever since." "You looking for work?" Alina's heart jumped. "I have not worked in 5 years. My references are outdated." "I would understand if that is a problem." Diane waved a dismissive hand. "I care about passion and knowledge, not gaps in employment. Life happens. What matters is where you are now. Can you start Monday?" That easily, Alina found herself back in the world she loved. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover her rent and basic expenses, but Alina did not care. She was working again, using her mind, contributing something meaningful. Diane treated her with respect, valued her opinions, and gave her increasing responsibility as the weeks passed. It was on a Thursday afternoon. 6 weeks after Alina started at the gallery, the Julian Cross walked through the door. He was tall, probably in his late 30s, with dark hair that had a tendency to fall across his forehead and intelligent gray eyes that took in every detail of the space. He wore well-tailored clothes that suggested success without ostentation, and he moved with quiet confidence. Alina was arranging a new display when he entered. She looked up, offering her professional smile. "Welcome to the Foster Gallery. Please let me know if you have any questions." Julian paused in front of a large, abstract piece. One of Alina's personal favorites by a young artist named Trevor Huang. He studied it for several minutes, its expression thoughtful. "This is interesting," he said finally. "The way he uses negative space to create tension. It is architectural in its precision, but emotional in its impact." Alina moved closer, pleased that someone else saw what she saw in the work. Exactly. Trevor trained as an engineer before. Switching to art, he brings that technical understanding, but filters it through genuine, emotional depth. Julian turned to her, and something in his expression made Alina's breath catch. Not in the overwhelming, almost suffocating way Graham used to make her feel, but in a way that felt like recognition, like meeting someone who spoke the same language. "You have a good eye," he said simply. Over the next hour, they walked through the gallery together. Julian asked thoughtful questions, and Alina found herself opening up about the artists, the creative process, the stories behind the pieces. When Diane emerged from her office and saw them talking, she caught Elena's eye with a knowing smile. Julian finally stopped in front of a series of watercolors, depicting urban landscapes. "I am actually here on business," he admitted. "I am an architect. My firm is completing a new mixed-use building downtown, high-end residential, with commercial space on the ground floor. We are looking for art to incorporate into the public spaces. Something that feels connected to Seattle, that speaks to both innovation and tradition." Elena felt her pulse quicken. "That is exactly what we specialize in. Local artists who capture the essence of the city while pushing creative boundaries. Could we set up a consultation?" Julian pulled out a business card. "I would love to discuss this further, see what pieces might work for the project." Elena took the card, their fingers brushing briefly. The name embossed on the card read Cross Architecture and Design with an address in one of the upscale office buildings near Pike Place Market. "Of course, would next Tuesday work?" "Perfect," Julian said. He hesitated at the door, then turned back. "I am glad I found this place. And glad I met you." After he left, Diane appeared at Elena's shoulder. Well, she said with amusement. "That was interesting." "It was a business inquiry," Elena protested, but she could feel her face warming. Diane laughed. "Honey, I have been running this gallery for 20 years. That man was interested in more than just art." The consultation on Tuesday turned into a 3-hour discussion over coffee. Julian brought his design partner, a sharp woman named Rachel Kim, and together they explored ideas for integrating art throughout the building. But Elena noticed that Julian's attention kept drifting to her, and several times their eyes met across the table with an intensity that had nothing to do with commercial art installations. Over the following weeks, Julian found reasons to stop by the gallery, sometimes with legitimate questions about the project, sometimes just to see what new pieces had arrived, sometimes Elena suspected, just to see her. He was different from Graham in every way. Where Graham had been commanding and controlling, Julian was collaborative and curious. Where Graham had dismissed her opinions, Julian actively sought them out. Where Graham had made her feel small, Julian made her feel seen. It was terrifying. One evening, Selena was closing up the gallery. Julian appeared at the door just as she was locking it. "I was hoping to catch you," he said, slightly out of breath, as if he had been hurrying. "I know this might be forward, but would you have dinner with me? Not about the project, just dinner." Elena froze, her hand on the key. "Julian, I appreciate the offer, but I am in the middle of a messy divorce. My life is complicated right now, and I am not sure I am ready for anything beyond professional." "I understand," he said gently, "and I am not trying to rush you into anything. But Elena, I enjoy talking with you. I enjoy being around you. We could just have dinner as friends. No pressure, no expectations." She wanted to say yes. She wanted it so much it scared her. But the wounds from Graham were still fresh, and the idea of trusting someone again felt impossible. "I need time," she said quietly. "Take all the time you need," Julian replied. "But I hope you know that I see you, Elena, not as someone to control or diminish, but as someone extraordinary." Before she could respond, he walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes and hope warring with fear in her chest. The decision was taken out of her hands. 2 weeks later, when Graham showed up at the gallery, Elena was alone, Diane having left early for a doctor's appointment. She looked up from the inventory she was organizing to find her soon-to-be ex-husband standing in the doorway, and her entire body went cold. Graham looked thinner than she remembered, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he was not sleeping well, but his expression was the same mixture of arrogance and entitlement she knew so well. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "We have lawyers for that," Elena replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You should not be here. 5 years of marriage, and you cannot give me 5 minutes?" Graham moved into the gallery, and Elena instinctively stepped back. "I made a mistake, Elena. I see that now. Come back home, and we can work through this." Elena stared at him, amazed that he truly believed she would consider it. "You humiliated me in public. You treated me like I was nothing for years. And now you want me back because what?" Because you realized you miss having someone to control? That is not fair, Graham said, anger flashing in his eyes. I gave you everything. That beautiful home, expensive clothes, a lifestyle most women would kill for. You gave me things, Elena corrected, but you never gave me respect. You never gave me partnership. You never even really saw me as a person. Graham's jaw clenched. I heard you were working in some little gallery now, barely making minimum wage. You are living in a dump in Capitol Hill. You threw away everything we had for this. I threw away a prison, Elena said firmly, and I found myself. You will regret this, Graham said coldly. When your little art project fails and you are struggling to pay rent, remember that I offered to take you back. Get out, Elena said, her voice shaking but strong. Get out now, or I call the police. Graham stared at her for a long moment, then turned and left without another word. Elena waited until she heard his car pull away before her legs gave out, and she sank into the chair behind the desk. Trembling from the confrontation, that was when Julian walked in, stopping short when he saw her face. Elena, what happened? She looked up at him, this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, and something inside her broke open. Graham was here, she said, and suddenly she was crying, all the fear and anger and residual pain pouring out. Julian crossed the space in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened at first, then relaxed into the embrace, letting herself be held, letting herself feel safe. I am sorry, he murmured against her hair. I am so sorry you had to go through that. They stood like that for several minutes, and Elena realized something profound. She was not afraid anymore, not of Julian, not of opening her heart again, not of the possibility that someone might actually love her the way she deserved to be loved. When she pulled back, looking up into Julian's concerned face, she made a decision. That dinner offer, she said softly. Is it still open? Julian's face broke into a smile that reached his eyes. Absolutely, as Elena locked up the gallery that night. With plans to meet Julian at a small Italian restaurant the following evening, she felt something she had not felt since the night she left Graham. She felt hope, real and tangible and full of possibility. Her ex-husband had tried to break her, to make her regret choosing herself. Instead, she was building a life that was authentic and meaningful. Surrounded by people who valued her, Graham had told her she would regret leaving. But standing there in the cool evening air, thinking about the dinner tomorrow and the man who saw her for who she truly was, Elena knew the only thing she regretted was not leaving sooner. 6 months after that first dinner with Julian, Elena's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The small studio apartment was still home, but now its walls were covered with her own artwork. Pieces she had started creating again after years of suppressing that part of herself. Julian had encouraged her to pick up a brush, reminding her that she was not just a curator, but an artist in her own right, and slowly, tentatively, she had begun to paint again. The relationship with Julian had unfolded naturally, without pressure or demands. He respected her boundaries, celebrated her independence, and seemed genuinely interested in who she was as a person rather than what she could do for him. They spent evenings talking about art and architecture, mornings walking through Pike Place Market, weekends exploring the islands around Seattle. With Julian, Elena learned what partnership actually meant, what it felt like to be with someone who wanted to build something together rather than mold her into a convenient accessory. The art installation at Julian's building had been a tremendous success. Elena had curated a collection that perfectly balanced the building's modern aesthetic with deeply rooted connections to Seattle's culture and history. The project had brought significant attention to the Foster Gallery, and Diane had been fielding inquiries from other developers and businesses interested in similar collaborations. It was a crisp October morning when Diane called Elena into her office with an unusual expression on her face, somewhere between excited and emotional. Elena sat down, concerned. Is everything okay? Diane smiled, her eyes glistening slightly. More than okay. Elena, I have been thinking about this for a while now, and the success of the Cross project confirmed what I already knew. You have incredible vision and talent. You understand art and business in a way that is rare. Elena waited, Sure where this was going. I am getting older, Diane continued. My husband wants us to travel, to enjoy our retirement while we still can. I have been looking for the right person to take over the gallery, someone who would honor what I built while bringing fresh energy and ideas. She paused, then smiled. I want that person to be you, Elena. I want to sell you the gallery. Elena felt the room spin slightly. Diane, I do not have that kind of money. The divorce settlement was not generous. Graham made sure of that, I know, Diane said gently. That is why I am proposing a payment plan, something manageable that would allow you to buy in over time. You have already proven yourself invaluable here. This place should be yours. Tears sprang to Elena's eyes. She thought about the girl who had walked out of that hotel 6 months ago with nothing but her dignity. The woman who had rebuilt her life one small piece at a time. Owning her own gallery had been a dream she had buried years ago, convinced it was impossible. And now Diane was offering her exactly that. Yes, Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I want this. Thank you, Diane. Thank you for believing in me. They spent the next hour discussing details, timelines, and visions for the gallery's future. Elena's mind was already spinning with ideas. Ways to expand their reach while maintaining the intimate, artist-focused approach that made the Foster Gallery special. That evening, she met Julian at their favorite waterfront restaurant to share the news. His face lit up when she told him, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. I am so proud of you, he said. You deserve this, Elena. You have worked incredibly hard, as they sat overlooking the water. Watching the ferries move across Elliott Bay, Julian reached across the table and took her hand. There is something I have been wanting to talk to you about, he said. Suddenly nervous in a way she rarely saw from him, Elena's heart quickened. What is it? My firm has been offered a major project in Barcelona, he said carefully. It is a career-defining opportunity, the kind of thing that only comes along once. But it would mean relocating for at least a year, possibly longer. Elena felt her chest tighten. Barcelona, a year. The old fears started creeping in, the ones that whispered that she was not enough, that he would leave, that happiness was always temporary. Julian squeezed her hand. I told them I needed time to think about it because the most important thing in my life is sitting right here. He looked directly into her eyes. Come with me, Elena. We could make it an adventure. You could explore the European art scene, make connections, gain inspiration for the gallery, and we would be together. She pulled her hand back, overwhelmed. Julian, I just got the gallery. I cannot just leave. I know, he said quickly, and I would never ask you to give up your dream. That is why I am still deciding. If you want to stay, I will turn down the project. You are more important than any building I could design. Elena stared at him, stunned. You would give up a career-defining opportunity for me? In a heartbeat, Julian said simply, because unlike your ex-husband, I understand what really matters. Success means nothing if I do not have you to share it with. The words broke something open inside Elena, the last remaining wall she had built around her heart. Julian was offering her a choice, not an ultimatum. He was willing to sacrifice for her the way she had once sacrificed for Graham. Except Julian was doing it out of love and respect rather than control. What if, Elena said slowly, thinking it through as she spoke, what if we found a way to do both? Diane mentioned wanting to travel during her transition period. What if I spent 6 months in Barcelona with you, using that time to build international connections for the gallery, and 6 months here managing things directly? We could make it work if we are both willing to compromise. Julian's face broke into that smile she loved, the one that made his whole face light up. You would really consider that? For you? For us? Yes, Elena said, and realized she meant it. You have shown me what real partnership looks like, Julian. It is not about one person sacrificing everything. It is about both people finding ways to support each other's dreams. They spent the rest of the evening planning, excitement building as they discussed the possibilities. For the first time in her adult life, Lena was making decisions based on what she wanted, not what someone else expected of her. And she was doing it with a partner who celebrated her choices rather than controlled them. The peace did not last long. 2 weeks later, Alina was at the gallery late on a Friday evening, working on plans for a major exhibition featuring emerging Pacific Northwest artists. The show would be her first major project as the gallery's new owner, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She was so focused on her work that she did not hear the door open or notice anyone enter until a familiar voice made her blood run cold. "Working late again, I see. Always so dedicated." Alina's head snapped up. Graham stood in the gallery entrance, and something about his posture, the way he held himself, set off alarm bells in her head. "What are you doing here, Graham?" "We have a restraining order." "A restraining order that expires next week," he corrected, moving further into the space. "I heard some interesting news. You are buying this place." Quite the step up from assistant. His tone was mocking, but Alina could hear something else underneath. Bitterness, jealousy, maybe even desperation. "Get out, Graham. I have nothing to say to you, but I have something to say to you," he continued, ignoring her demand. "I heard about your little European adventure, too. Jetting off to Barcelona with your architect boyfriend? Must be nice, trading up to someone with even more money than me." Alina stood, anger replacing her initial fear. "That is what you think this is about? Money? I left you because you treated me like garbage, Graham. I am with Julian because he treats me like a person." Graham's expression darkened. "You made me look like a fool, Alina. Do you know what people say? That my wife left me for nothing, that she chose poverty over me. You humiliated me. I humiliated you." Alina felt years of suppressed anger rising to the surface. "You told me to stay away because I was embarrassing you in front of your business associates. You dismissed everything I said, everything I cared about. You had affairs and expected me to just accept it. And somehow I am the one who humiliated you?" "I gave you everything," Graham said, his voice rising. "I made you someone. Without me, you were just a mediocre curator at a second-rate gallery." The words were meant to wound, to make her doubt herself the way she had for so many years, but they bounced off harmlessly because Alina finally understood her own worth. "No, Graham," she said calmly. "You did not make me someone. You tried to unmake me. You tried to erase who I was so you could have a pretty accessory on your arm. And I let you for far too long." Graham took a step toward her, and Alina saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "You think you have one? You think your little life is so perfect now? I can destroy this, Alina. One phone call to the building inspectors, one complaint to the right people, and your gallery is finished." Before Alina could respond, the gallery door opened again. Julian walked in, followed by 2 police officers. Alina had texted him when she first saw Graham, a precaution they had set up after the last unwanted visit. "Everything okay here?" one of the officers asked, his hand resting casually on his belt. Graham's face went white as he realized he had been caught. "I was just leaving," he said quickly. "Not yet," the officer replied. "We received a report of harassment in violation of a protective order. Sir, I need you to step outside." As the officers escorted Graham out, he turned back to look at Alina one last time. She expected to see anger or threats, but instead, she saw something that looked almost like regret. Like he was finally realizing what he had lost. But it was too late for regret, too late for apologies. That chapter of her life was closed. After Graham was gone, and the police had taken her statement, Julian wrapped his arms around Alina. She leaned into him, feeling safe and protected but also strong in her own right. "I am sorry you had to deal with that," he said softly. Alina shook her head. "No, I needed that. I needed to face him one more time and realize that his words do not have power over me anymore. He is just a bitter man who destroyed something good because he could not see its value." Over the next 2 months, Alina threw herself into preparing for the exhibition. She worked with 8 emerging artists, helping them refine their presentations, telling their stories, creating a cohesive show that was both visually stunning and emotionally resonant. Julian supported her every step of the way, offering opinions when asked but never trying to take over, celebrating her decisions, reminding her to eat and sleep when she got to. It's absorbed in the work. The night of the opening arrived with perfect autumn weather. The gallery had been transformed, with carefully placed lighting that made each piece shine. Local press had been invited. Art collectors, other gallery owners, and most importantly, the artists themselves, along with their friends and families. Alina stood near the entrance in a simple black dress, greeting guests as they arrived. She felt nervous, but also exhilarated, more alive than she had felt in years. Diane arrived first, beaming with pride. "This is incredible, Alina. You have truly made this space your own," as the gallery filled with people. Alina moved through the crowd, introducing artists to potential buyers, answering questions, facilitating connections. She was in her element, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Julian stayed close, but not hovering. And several times she caught him watching her with an expression of pure admiration. About an hour into the event, Alina was talking with a journalist from a local arts magazine when she saw him. Graham stood just inside the entrance, not causing a scene, just watching. Their eyes met across the room, and Alina excused herself from the conversation. She walked over to him, her head held high. "You should not be here, Graham." He looked around the gallery, taking in the crowd, the artwork, the obvious success of the evening. "I know," he said quietly. "I just wanted to see it. To see what you built." Alina crossed her arms, waiting. "I was wrong," Graham said. And for once there was no arrogance in his voice, just tired honesty about everything. "I had something precious, and I threw it away because I was too stupid and proud to see what was right in front of me. You were never the embarrassment, Lena. I was." It was the apology she had once dreamed of hearing, but now it came too late and mattered too little. "I appreciate you saying that," Alina replied calmly, "but it does not change anything. You taught me what I do not want in a partner, and in a strange way, I should thank you for that. Leaving you was the best decision I ever made." Graham nodded slowly, acceptance finally settling over his features. "You look happy." "Really happy I am," Alina said simply. "Now please leave. This is my night, and I do not want you here." He turned to go, then paused. "For what it is worth, he is a lucky man." "Whoever he is, his name is Julian," Alina said, "and I am the lucky one." After Graham left, Alina returned to the gallery floor, shaking off the encounter. Julian appeared at her side immediately. "You okay?" "Perfect," she said, and meant it. "Just closing an old door." The evening was a tremendous success. 4 pieces sold that night, with several more inquiries. Critics praised the show, collectors exchanged business cards, and the artists glowed with the recognition they deserved. As the crowd finally thinned and the last guests departed, Lena stood in the center of her gallery, exhausted but triumphant. Julian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Proud of yourself?" he asked incredibly. Alina admitted, leaning back against him. "I did this, Julian. I actually did this." "You did," he agreed. "And this is just the beginning." He turned her to face him, and there was something in his expression that made her heart skip. "Alina Rivera," he said softly, "you are the strongest, most talented, most remarkable woman I have ever known. Watching you tonight, seeing you in your element, I fell in love with you all over again." "Julian," she started, but he pressed a gentle finger to her lips. "Let me finish. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You challenge me, inspire me, make me want to be better. And I know we have Barcelona coming up, and the future is full of unknowns. But there is one thing I am absolutely certain about." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Elena's breath caught. "I love you, Elena. Not because of what you can do for me, or how you make me look to others, but because of who you are. Your kindness, your passion, your resilience, your incredible heart. Will you marry me?" Alina looked at the ring, then at Julian's face, then around at the gallery that represented everything she had built from the ashes of her old life. A year ago, she had been someone's embarrassment, someone's discarded possession. Now she was a business owner, an artist, a woman who knew her own worth. And she was loved by someone who celebrated her rather than diminished her. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Julian, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, and pulled her into a kiss. Alina thought about the night Graham had humiliated her at that charity gala. The moment that had seemed like the worst night of her life. She had been so broken, so convinced that she was worthless. But that humiliation had been the catalyst for everything good that followed. It had forced her to choose herself, to rebuild, to remember who she was and who she wanted to be. Graham had tried to make her regret leaving. Instead, she had built a life so full of purpose and love that she could not imagine having stayed. His cruelty had inadvertently set her free, and his loss had become her greatest gain. 6 months later, Alina and Julian married in a small ceremony on one of the San Juan Islands, surrounded by close friends and family. Diane cried happy tears. Monica gave a toast about her sister's strength and resilience. The artists from Elena's first exhibition attended, grateful for the woman who had believed in them, as Alina danced with her new husband under string lights with the ocean breeze in her hair. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain, the fear, the slow rebuilding of her life and her confidence. She thought about Graham somewhere out there, hopefully learning to be a better person, but ultimately irrelevant to her happiness.
The humiliation that was meant to break her had instead awakened her. The husband who told her to stay away had pushed her toward the life she was always meant to live. And the regret Graham had wanted her to feel had transformed into profound gratitude for the courage to start over. Elena Rivera had been told she was an embarrassment. Now she was a gallery owner, an artist, a partner to someone who treasured her, and most importantly, a woman who finally understood her own immeasurable worth. And as she looked around at the people celebrating with her, all of them there because they valued her for exactly who she was, Elena knew that the best revenge was not making Graham regret his choices. The best revenge was building a life so beautiful that his opinion simply did not matter anymore. She had done more than survive. She had flourished. And that was the ending she had written for herself.